I stood in the crowded auditorium, my heart racing as I scanned row after row of beaming faces. Proud parents clutched bouquets, grandparents wiped away tears, siblings waved excitedly from their seats, but the two chairs I'd reserved in the third row remained empty. My phone buzzed against my hip, and I already knew what the message would say before I read it. "Too tired to make the drive today, sweetie. We'll celebrate later." 3 hours. That's all it would have taken them to get here. My fingers trembled as another notification popped up. Instagram. My sister Megan had just posted a photo. There they were, my parents raising champagne glasses at Serenity Springs Spa, their faces glowing with relaxation. The caption read, "Family Spa Day with my favorite people." The dean's voice echoed through the speakers calling us to take our places. I adjusted the valedictorian sash across my chest, feeling its weight differently now. In just 30 minutes, I would stand at that podium. And I knew exactly what I was going to say. The emptiness of those chairs shouldn't have surprised me. For 22 years, I had been the shadow in my own family portrait present, but never quite seen. The evidence stretched back as far as I could remember, starting with the baby albums my mother kept on the coffee table. Megan's book overflowed with professional photographs, each milestone documented with artistic precision. First smile, first tooth, first steps, all captured in glossy prints with dates meticulously recorded in my mother's flowing script. My album contained exactly 12 pictures, most of them blurry snapshots where I appeared accidentally in the background of Megan's photos. By the time I started elementary school, the pattern had solidified into an unspoken family law. Megan's kindergarten graduation warranted a celebration dinner at the fanciest restaurant in town, complete with a 3-tier cake and professional photographer. When my turn came 2 years later, I got a pat on the head and leftover pizza. Christie doesn't like big fusses, my mother would tell anyone who asked, though no one ever had. The disparities only grew more pronounced as we aged. Megan's 7th birthday party filled our backyard with a carnival theme, complete with pony rides and a cotton candy machine. For my 9th birthday, which fell on the same weekend as one of Megan's dance competitions, I unwrapped a gift card to Target at a highway rest stop between performances. "We'll do something special next year," my father promised, but next year brought another competition, another forgotten promise. Middle school introduced new depths to their favoritism. When Megan struggled with basic algebra, my parents hired a tutor who came 3 times a week at $50 an hour. When I asked for help with advanced calculus in high school, they handed me a library card. "You're smart enough to figure it out yourself," became their standard response to my academic needs. And I did figure it out, earning straight A's while Megan coasted through with C's that somehow warranted ice cream celebrations. The financial discrimination cut deepest. Every report card season, Megan received $20 for each B and $50 for each A. Her mediocre grades netted her spending money that she flaunted in designer bags and weekly manicures. My consistent honor roll status earned me a nod and the reminder that good grades are their own reward. I started working at 14, babysitting neighborhood kids and tutoring younger students, saving every penny for the college fund my parents assured me they couldn't afford to start. High school brought the starkest contrasts yet. Megan's 16th birthday delivered a cherry red convertible wrapped in a giant white bow. She crashed it within 3 months, texting while driving, and my parents replaced it with an even newer model because accidents happen to everyone. For my 16th, I received a used bicycle from a garage sale and a lecture about the value of eco-friendly transportation. Their attendance at school events followed the same predictable pattern. Every one of Megan's cheerleading performances saw them in the front row, recording on multiple devices, cheering loud enough to embarrass even her. They flew to different states for regional competitions, booking hotel suites, and taking time off work without complaint. During the same years, I competed in Science Olympiad Model UN and Academic Decathlon, often placing first in state competitions. Not once did they appear in those auditoriums. The night I won the National Science Fair with my research on affordable water purification systems, I stood on stage in Washington, D.C., accepting a $10,000 scholarship while surrounded by other winners whose families had flown in from around the world. I told my parents about it 3 months in advance, circled the date in red on every calendar in the house, even offered to pay for their plane tickets with my babysitting money. They chose that weekend to take Megan on a spa retreat because she'd had a rough week after breaking up with her boyfriend. College applications revealed the true extent of their financial priorities. When Megan decided on a party school known more for its Greek life than academics, my parents took out loans without hesitation. They paid her tuition room and board sorority dues, and even set up a monthly allowance for expenses. Her expenses apparently included spring breaks and Cabo weekend shopping sprees and a meal plan she never used because eating out was more fun. When I received my acceptance letter to our state's top university with a partial academic scholarship, they sat me down for a serious talk about financial responsibility. "We can't afford to help with 2 college tuitions," my mother explained, avoiding eye contact. "And we've already committed to Megan's education. You understand, don't you?" "You've always been so independent." Independent. That word followed me like a curse disguised as a compliment. It meant working 3 jobs through college while maintaining a perfect GPA. It meant choosing between textbooks and meals, some weeks learning to survive on ramen and determination. It meant watching Megan post photos from her dorm room that looked like a luxury hotel suite while I shared a cramped space with 2 roommates in the cheapest housing available. Last month, curiosity finally drove me to do something I'd avoided for years. I searched through the filing cabinet in my father's office while they were out. What I found among the financial documents made my stomach turn. Not only had they taken out loans for Megan's education, they'd also been setting aside money in a separate account labeled Megan's Future Fund. The statements went back years, steady deposits that coincidentally matched the amounts they claimed they couldn't afford when I'd asked for SAT prep classes or application fees for competitive programs. But the document that truly shattered my last illusions was hidden at the very back of the drawer. My mother's journal from the month before graduation, left carelessly among tax returns. Her handwriting spelled out what I'd always suspected but never wanted to confirm. "Megan's been so stressed with her finals. She needs a break more than we need to sit through Christie's boring ceremony. Booked the spa surprise for graduation weekend. Christie won't even notice we're gone. She never notices anything." Those words echoed in my mind as I stood in my cap and gown watching happy families celebrate together. She was wrong about one thing, though. I noticed everything. I noticed the Christmas mornings when Megan's gift pile dwarfed mine. I noticed the photo walls in our house that featured hundreds of Megan's images and maybe 10 of mine. I noticed the way conversations shifted when I entered a room, how their animation died when talking to me versus the way they lit up for my sister. Most of all, I noticed the milestone moments that passed without witness. My first published research paper in a peer-reviewed journal during sophomore year. Making Dean's List every single semester. Being selected for a prestigious summer internship that only accepted 5 students nationwide. Each achievement I'd shared with empty air, celebrating alone in my dorm room with a cup of instant coffee and the promise that someday, somehow, I'd make them see me. Today was that day. As I looked around the auditorium filling with families who understood that showing up mattered, I felt the speech I'd originally written dissolving in my mind. The polite, grateful words about opportunity and hard work no longer seemed adequate. 22 years of being invisible had led to this moment, and I finally understood that their absence wasn't a disappointment. It was a gift. It freed me to speak the truth they'd spent my entire life avoiding. My phone buzzed again. Another spa photo, this time of the 3 of them in matching robes holding mimosas. The timestamp showed they'd been there since 8 this morning, the exact time I'd texted reminding them about the ceremony. They'd read it and chosen luxury over love, comfort over commitment, my sister over me, just like always. But for the first time in my life, their choice didn't hurt. It clarified everything. As I tucked my phone away and straightened my shoulders, I realized I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. I was the valedictorian with something important to say, and in 20 minutes, everyone would hear it. The hurt I'd carried for 22 years crystallized into something sharper that morning: determination. Instead of crying in my dorm room like I might have done even 6 months ago, I opened my laptop and began rewriting my valedictorian speech. The original version had been safe-filled with gratitude toward the university and optimistic platitudes about the future. Those hollow words felt like ash in my mouth now. This moment called for truth, not politeness. My fingers flew across the keyboard, powered by years of suppressed feelings, finally finding their voice. Each sentence carved away at the facade I'd maintained for so long, the good daughter who never complained, never demanded, never expected. The cursor blinked on the screen as I crafted words that would honor not just my journey, but the journey of every student who'd ever succeeded despite their circumstances, rather than because of them. A knock at my door interrupted my writing. Dr. Sarah Martinez stood in the hallway, her dark eyes filled with the kind of maternal concern I'd rarely experienced. She'd been my biochemistry professor, then my research advisor, and somewhere along the way, she'd become the closest thing to a mother figure I'd ever known. "Christie, I wanted to check on you before the ceremony," she said, stepping into my room. Her gaze fell on my laptop screen, and something in my expression must have revealed everything, because her face softened with understanding. "They're not coming, are they?" The question broke through my composure. Tears I'd been holding back for hours finally spilled over as I showed her the Instagram posts. Dr. Martinez studied them in silence, her jaw tightening with each champagne-filled photo. When she looked back at me, fury blazed in her eyes, but her voice remained gentle. "Do you know what I see when I look at you?" she asked, sitting beside me on the narrow dorm bed. "I see a young woman who turned neglect into determination, who transformed abandonment into achievement. Your parents' absence isn't your failure, Christie. It's theirs." She pulled out her phone and showed me something that made my heart swell. A group text with 12 other professors, all discussing their plans to attend my graduation. They'd been coordinating for weeks, ensuring I'd have a cheering section despite my family's predictable absence. "We've watched you excel for 4 years," Dr. Martinez continued. "Not because anyone pushed you, but because you pushed yourself. Do you remember when you came to my office hours at first semester, you were so worried about bothering me with questions? Now, you're headed to Johns Hopkins for medical school, though you haven't told your family yet, have you?" I shook my head. The acceptance letter had arrived 2 weeks ago, but sharing it with parents who'd never celebrated my achievements felt pointless. They probably didn't even know I'd taken the MCAT, let alone scored in the 99th percentile. "May I make a suggestion about your speech?" Dr. Martinez asked. "Whatever you're planning to say, make sure it comes from your truth. But also," she smiled with a hint of mischief, "I happen to know someone from Channel 7 News who's covering the ceremony. They're always looking for compelling human interest stories." After she left, I dove back into writing with renewed purpose. My roommate Emma returned from her morning run to find me surrounded by crumpled paper and empty coffee cups. She'd been my rock through 4 years of family disappointments, the one who held me when I cried, after each missed event, each forgotten birthday, each achievement that went uncelebrated at home. "They posted more photos," she said quietly, showing me her phone. "Megan's bragging about the surprise spa day her parents planned. The comments are not kind. People are starting to piece together that it's your graduation day." I looked at the screen to see classmates already calling out the timing. "Isn't today Christie's graduation?" one commented. Weird flex to post spa pics when your sister is becoming valedictorian, wrote another. Megan had responded with laughing emojis, and Christie doesn't mind. She's too busy being serious to care about family time. Emma's face flushed with anger. Want me to respond? Because I have screenshots of every time they've done this. Remember when they skipped your National Honor Society induction for her spray tan appointment? Or when they missed your research presentation because Megan needed emotional support after failing her driver's test for the third time? Hey, save your energy, I told her, returning to my speech. I have something better planned. Emma read over my shoulder as I wrote, occasionally gasping at particularly pointed passages. Christie, this is powerful, but are you sure you want to burn these bridges? They burned them years ago, I replied. I'm just finally acknowledging the ashes. We practiced the speech together with Emma playing the audience. She helped me perfect the pacing, the moments to pause for effect, the exact tone that balanced truth-telling with dignity. When I delivered the line about creating your own family through choice rather than chance, she wiped away tears. You need to see this, Emma said suddenly, showing me her laptop. She'd been researching while I practiced diving into our family's social media history. The patterns she'd found were even starker than I'd realized. My parents had posted about every tiny achievement of Megan's, from participation trophies to successful hair appointments. Meanwhile, my full scholarship announcement, my research publications, my academic awards, none of them appeared on their timelines. Look at this. Emma pointed to a post from 2 years ago. My mother had written a lengthy tribute to Megan for completing her first semester of community college with a 2.5 GPA. Posted the same day I'd been inducted into Phi Beta Kappa, an honor that went entirely unmentioned. The final straw came when Emma found a public conversation between my parents and a family friend who'd asked about my plans after graduation. Christie will figure something out, she always does, my mother had responded. We're focusing on helping Megan find her path right now. My phone rang, showing a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end introduced herself as Eleanor, my father's mother. I hadn't heard from her in 5 years, not since she'd been effectively excommunicated from the family for daring to question their treatment of me. Christie, sweetheart, I saw the posts, she said without preamble. I'm 2 hours away, but I'm getting in my car now. You will not stand on that stage without family who loves you. Her words broke something open inside me. Grandma, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I've been documenting everything for years, hoping someday you'd be ready to see it. The favoritism, the financial discrimination, all of it. I have photos, cards, even recordings of conversations where they discuss their preference for Megan. I've been waiting for you to find your voice, and it sounds like today's the day. After we hung up, I felt a shift in my resolve. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about every child who'd ever been deemed less worthy of love, every sibling who'd lived in someone else's shadow, every person who'd had to create their own light because their family wouldn't share theirs. Emma helped me choose my outfit with extra care. Not the simple black dress I'd originally planned, but a deep blue that brought out the determination in my eyes. We pinned my honors cords and medallions with precision, each one representing an achievement my parents had ignored. The valedictorian sash went on last, its gold letters catching the light like armor. You look like someone ready to change the world, Emma said. Let's start with changing my story, I replied, tucking my speech into my portfolio. As we prepared to leave for the ceremony, my phone continued buzzing with messages. Professors confirming they'd be there, classmates expressing outrage at the spa posts. Even my freshman year resident advisor reached out to say she was driving down to attend. The family I'd chosen was assembling, ready to witness what my biological family had chosen to miss. But the most unexpected message came from someone named Patricia at Channel 7 News. Dr. Martinez mentioned you might have an interesting story to share. We're particularly interested in pieces about resilience and found family. Would you be willing to speak with us after your speech? I agreed immediately. The truth I'd been hiding for 22 years was about to be broadcast far wider than I'd ever imagined. As Emma and I walked toward the auditorium, I thought about my parents lounging at their spa, probably on their second bottle of champagne by now. They had no idea that their absence would become the catalyst for my most powerful moment. For the first time in my life, I was grateful for their neglect. It had taught me to stand on my own feet, to find family in unexpected places, to turn pain into purpose. Today, I wouldn't be speaking as a forgotten daughter. I'd be speaking as Christie Martinez, soon the name I'd already filed paperwork to adopt in honor of the professor who'd shown me more maternal love than I'd ever known. My parents had given me life, but they'd never given me belonging. So I'd found it myself, and that journey deserved to be shared. Graduation day dawned with the kind of brilliant sunshine that should have made everything feel hopeful. Instead, I woke to my phone screen, filled with fresh excuses, each notification, another twist of the knife they didn't realize they were holding. My father's text arrived at 6:43 in the morning. "Christy, my back is acting up again. Doc says I shouldn't sit for long periods. Mom will explain more. No, congratulations on your big day. Big? No, we're proud of you." Just another manufactured reason to avoid showing up for me. My mother's message followed minutes later, a lengthy paragraph about traffic concerns and gas prices, and how the 3-hour drive would be just too much with Dad's back issues. She'd taken time to craft elaborate justifications, but couldn't spare 5 seconds to acknowledge what today meant. 4 years of perfect grades, countless hours in the lab surviving on 4 hours of sleep, and sheer willpower, all reduced to an inconvenient event that conflicted with their spa plans. I typed and deleted a dozen responses before settling on something simple. "I understand. Hope Dad feels better. The ceremony will be live-streamed if you change your mind." I even included the link, though we all knew they wouldn't click it. They'd be too busy getting hot stone massages and posting about their much-needed family time. Emma stirred in her bed across the room, taking one look at my face before wordlessly wrapping me in a hug. She'd witnessed too many mornings like this, where their rejection hit fresh despite being entirely predictable. "Screenshot everything," she advised. "You might need it later." So I did, methodically saving each excuse to a folder I'd labeled evidence months ago. Future therapists would probably have a field day with that folder, but for now, it served as proof that I wasn't imagining their behavior, wasn't being overdramatic or ungrateful, like they always claimed when anyone dared to notice the disparities. A knock interrupted my documentation project. Emma opened the door to reveal Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, Emma's parents, holding a garment bag and a bakery box. They'd driven up the night before, booking a hotel specifically to be here for their daughter's graduation. The contrast with my own parents felt like salt in an open wound until Mrs. Johnson pulled me into the kind of motherly embrace I'd only seen in movies. "We thought you might want to get ready together," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "And Tom insisted on stopping at that French bakery you girls always talk about." Mr. Johnson held up the box with a proud smile. "Chocolate croissants and those almond things you like, Christy. Big day requires proper fuel." The garment bag contained a beautiful silk scarf in my university's colors. "For the girl who's been like a second daughter to us these 4 years, Mrs. Johnson explained, tears threatening her mascara. "We couldn't let you graduate without a gift from family." Family, the word lodged in my throat as I fingered the delicate fabric. The Johnsons had included me in their holiday cards, called to check on me during finals week, sent care packages addressed to both our girls. They'd offered more genuine parental affection in 4 years than I'd received in 22. "Now," Mrs. Johnson said, switching to practical mode, "breakfast first, then we'll do hair and makeup. Can't have our valedictorian looking anything less than spectacular." We relocated to their hotel suite, which felt like stepping into the kind of pre-graduation morning I'd always imagined. Mrs. Johnson had brought a professional makeup kit, claiming she'd been watching YouTube tutorials specifically for today. Emma and I sat side by side as her mother worked her magic, transforming us from sleep-deprived students into young women ready to conquer the world. My phone buzzed intermittently with updates from classmates. The spa posts had evolved into a full social media production. Megan now had Instagram stories showing every aspect of their pampering, from mud masks to champagne toasts. Each update felt deliberately timed, posted at moments when normal families would be preparing for graduation. "Don't look at those," Emma commanded, confiscating my phone, "but you need to see this instead." She showed me her own screen, where our university's Facebook page had posted about today's ceremony. The comments section overflowed with parents expressing their pride, their excitement, their travel plans from different states and countries to watch their children graduate. One mother had written, "Wouldn't miss this for the world. Some moments only happen once." That simple truth made my chest tighten. Some moments only happened once, and my parents had chosen a spa day over witnessing mine. But as I watched the Johnsons fuss over both Emma and me, equally adjusting our caps and taking photos, I realized something profound. Their absence created space for others to step in to show me what parental love actually looked like. My phone rang, showing my cousin Amy's name. She rarely called, usually staying neutral in family dynamics to avoid my parents' wrath. "Christie, I need to tell you something," she said without greeting. "I overheard them planning this spa trip months ago. They specifically chose graduation day. Mom asked if they'd mixed up the dates, and your mom laughed. Said it was perfect timing because they'd have an excuse to miss your boring academic stuff." The confirmation of their deliberate planning should have hurt more. Instead, it felt like the last piece of armor sliding into place. They hadn't forgotten or double-booked or made an innocent mistake. They'd chosen to hurt me, betting on my usual silence to protect them from consequences. Today, that silence would end. "There's more," Amy continued. "Megan's been bragging in the family group chat about how your parents are treating her to this because she's been so stressed about her part-time job at the mall. The same job she's called out from 8 times this month. I took screenshots of everything." I thanked Amy and hung up, filing away this new evidence. Mr. Johnson, who'd been quietly observing, cleared his throat. "Christie, Emma told us a bit about your situation. We want you to know you have a place at our table today and always. Real family shows up." His words carried such simple conviction that I had to excuse myself to the bathroom to compose myself. When I returned, Mrs. Johnson had laid out a breakfast spread worthy of a celebration. We ate together, the 4 of us, talking about everything except my absent parents. They asked about medical school, about my research, about my dreams, with the genuine interest my biological family had never shown. "Did you know Christie's research on water purification might be implemented in 3 developing nations?" Emma bragged on my behalf. "She's literally gonna save lives." The Johnsons beamed with pride that rightfully belonged to my parents. They asked the intelligent questions, wanted to understand the science, celebrated the achievement, rather than dismissing it as too complicated, like my family always had. As we prepared to leave for the ceremony, my phone showed one final insult. Megan had posted a video to her stories, clearly tipsy despite the early hour. In it, she giggled while my mother applied a face mask, saying, "Christie's probably giving some boring speech right now, so glad we're here instead." My father's laughter echoed in the background. Emma saw my face and immediately grabbed the phone. "Nope, we're done with them for now. This is your day and they don't get to ruin it from a distance." She was right, but I made one last check of my messages. Between the family cruelty lay unexpected kindness, former teachers reaching out with congratulations, my high school counselor saying she'd be watching the live stream, work supervisors expressing pride. Each message came from someone who'd chosen to pay attention, to celebrate, to show up in whatever way they could. "Ready?" Mrs. Johnson asked, adjusting my valedictorian sash one final time. I looked at myself in the mirror, seeing not the forgotten daughter, but the young woman I'd become despite everything. The honors cords draped across my shoulders represented achievements earned through my own determination. The cap sat properly on hair styled by someone who cared. The designer scarf from the Johnsons added a splash of color that felt like armor against invisibility. Actually, I said, pulling out my speech to add one more line, I think I finally am. As we walked to the car, Mr. Johnson insisted on driving us to campus in style, meaning their reliable sedan that smelled like vanilla air freshener and had a proud parent bumper sticker. Such a simple thing being driven to graduation by parental figures who wanted to be there, yet it meant everything. The spa photos continued rolling in during the drive. My parents and Megan living their best life while I prepared for one of the most important moments of mine. But surrounded by the Johnsons' genuine affection, their excited chatter about the ceremony, their absolute certainty that I deserved to be celebrated, I found the pain transforming into something else. Not forgiveness, not yet, but clarity about who deserved space in my life going forward. My phone buzzed with one last message before Emma confiscated it again. Grandma Eleanor had made it to town and would be in the audience. I had family there after all, just not the ones whose absence had once defined me. Today wouldn't be about who was missing. It would be about who showed up, who saw my worth, who chose to witness my moment, even when DNA didn't obligate them to care. As we pulled into campus, I saw news vans already setting up for the ceremony coverage. Dr. Martinez had kept her promise about alerting her media contact. The story I'd kept private for so long would soon be very public indeed. My parents had given me material for a powerful speech by assuming I'd never use it. Their absence, which they'd intended as just another dismissal, would become the catalyst for finding my voice at last. The university auditorium buzzed with an energy that made the air itself feel electric. Families streamed through the entrance doors, their arms full of flowers and congratulatory balloons, faces bright with the kind of pride that should have been universal on a day like this. I stood near the graduate assembly area, watching the choreographed chaos of love and celebration unfolding around me, trying not to let the contrast with my own situation show on my face. Christie Martinez. A familiar voice made me turn. Mr. Williams, my high school AP chemistry teacher, stood before me with his wife and teenage daughter. He looked exactly the same, down to the coffee stain on his shirt pocket, but his eyes held an emotion I couldn't quite place. "You came," I breathed, overwhelmed by his presence. "Oh, 4 hours is nothing," he said, pulling me into a careful hug. "I've been telling everyone who'd listen about my student who was headed for greatness. Couldn't miss seeing you prove me right." His wife smiled warmly. "He talks about you all the time, says you're the reason he still teaches knowing students like you are out there." Their daughter, probably 16, studied me with curious eyes. "Dad made us leave at 5 this morning. He said some moments are worth any amount of effort to witness. This must be one of them." That philosophy, so simple yet so foreign to my own family's approach, made my throat tight. While my parents couldn't manage a 3-hour drive, this man had gotten his family up before dawn to support a student he'd taught 5 years ago. "Where are your parents sitting?" Mr. Williams asked innocently. "We'd love to say hello." Emma appeared at my elbow with perfect timing. "Christie's family section is pretty full already. You might want to grab seats while you can." She steered the conversation away with practiced ease while I collected myself. More unexpected faces appeared in the growing crowd. Dr. Rodriguez, who'd overseen my first independent research project, Professor Chen from organic chemistry, who'd stayed after class countless times to answer my endless questions. Dr. Patterson from the writing center, who'd helped me polish my medical school essays. Each had driven hours, rearranged schedules, chosen to be present for this moment. "The whole department's here," Dr. Rodriguez informed me with a grin. We even have a betting pool on whether you'll make everyone cry with your speech. I've got $20 on yes. My phone, which Emma had reluctantly returned for emergency purposes, showed the family group chat Amy had mentioned. The screenshots made my stomach turn. Megan bragging about the surprise spa day their parents had planned specifically for graduation day. My mother responding with heart emojis and comments about needing this break from Christie's intensity. My father joking that at least they wouldn't have to pretend to understand her science stuff. But between the cruelty lay unexpected warmth. Former co-workers from my campus jobs messaging their congratulations. The family I'd nannied for sending photos of their kids holding "Congratulations, Christie" signs. My freshman year RA posting about how proud she was to have watched my journey. Each message came from someone who'd noticed me, valued me, chosen to celebrate me without any obligation to do so. Christie, a voice called across the crowd. Marcus, my manager from the campus bookstore, approached with his entire extended family in tow. Had to close the store for the morning. Some things are more important than textbook returns. His mother, who I'd met once when she'd visited the store, hugged me like a long-lost daughter. Marcus talks about you all the time. Says you're the hardest worker he's ever supervised. We wouldn't miss this. The pattern continued as more people found me. Each had a story about why they'd come, what I'd meant to them, how my work or kindness or determination had impacted their lives. The validation felt surreal after years of being told I expected too much, wanted too much, demanded too much from family. Is that Christie? A woman with a press badge approached. I'm Patricia from Channel 7. Dr. Martinez told me about your story. Would you be willing to do a brief interview after the ceremony? We're doing a piece on non-traditional support systems and found family. I agreed, noticing her cameraman already capturing B-roll of the gathering crowd. The story that had been mine alone for so long would soon belong to the public. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like justice approaching on steady feet. My grandmother's arrival caused a minor commotion. Eleanor Martinez, she'd legally changed her name years ago in solidarity with her values, moved through the crowd like a force of nature. At 73, she commanded attention with her silver hair swept into an elegant bun and her designer suit that screamed, "Successful businesswoman." She'd built a consulting firm from nothing after my grandfather's death, channeling her grief into empire building. There's my granddaughter, she announced loudly enough for surrounding families to hear. The valedictorian, the one headed to Johns Hopkins, the one who did it all without a penny from those people who call themselves parents. She hugged me fiercely, whispering in my ear, I've brought some things you need to see. But after, today is about your triumph, not their failures. The medical school news rippled through my gathered supporters. None of them had known about Johns Hopkins because I'd shared the acceptance with no one certain my parents would find a way to diminish it. But Grandma Eleanor had her sources apparently, and she wielded the information like a weapon against anyone who dare suggest I hadn't exceeded every expectation. Hopkins, Christie. Dr. Martinez appeared with tears in her eyes. You didn't tell me you'd gotten in. I was waiting for the right moment, I admitted. This is the right moment, she declared, then raised her voice to the surrounding professors. Our Christie is headed to the best medical school in the country. The cheers that erupted drew stares from other families. My chosen family celebrated with the enthusiasm my biological one had reserved only for Megan's achievements. They high-fived and hugged and wiped away proud tears, creating the scene that should have played out in my childhood home that morning. Meanwhile, the spa documentation continued its social media spiral. Someone had created a split-screen post on one side, the graduation program, listing me as valedictorian. On the other, screenshots of my family's spa photos with timestamps proving they'd been there since before dawn. The comments ranged from disbelief to outrage, with classmates and strangers alike expressing their disgust. Did you see this? Emma showed me her phone. A Twitter thread about the situation had gone viral with thousands of retweets in the past hour alone. People are calling them out by name. Your mom's Facebook is getting flooded with angry messages. I felt a moment of vindication before pushing it aside. Their public humiliation wasn't my goal. My goal was simpler to speak my truth and honor the people who'd actually shown up for me. The graduates began assembling for our processional. As valedictorian, I'd walk near the front, visible to everyone. The weight of that visibility felt different now. I wasn't the forgotten daughter sneaking through life unnoticed. I was Christie Martinez, surrounded by professors who'd nurtured my potential employers, who'd respected my work ethic, friends who'd become family, and a grandmother who'd fought to maintain a relationship despite the cost. "In 5 minutes," a coordinator called out. Dr. Martinez squeezed my hand. "Remember, speak from your truth. The rest will follow." As I took my place in line, I spotted Patricia from Channel 7 positioning her crew for optimal coverage. The university president walked by, pausing to whisper, "I've been informed about your unique support system today. The entire administration is honored to have you as our valedictorian." Word had spread then. Good. Let them all know that biological family was just one form of connection and not always the strongest one. The family I'd collected through years of being overlooked now filled an entire section of the auditorium. They'd driven through dawn, rearranged schedules, closed businesses, all to witness a moment my parents had dismissed as boring and inconvenient. My phone buzzed one last time before I silenced it. Megan had posted a video of herself getting a facial laughing about missing Christie's boring day for this blessed self-care. The spa employee in the background looked uncomfortable, clearly aware of the growing social media backlash. Comments poured in faster than Megan could delete them, each one defending me with the fierce loyalty my sister had never shown. The processional music began those familiar notes that marked the transition from student to graduate. As we filed into the auditorium, I caught sight of my assembled supporters. They filled 3 full rows, a patchwork family bound by choice rather than blood. Grandma Eleanor sat front and center, her phone raised to record every moment. The Johnsons waved enthusiastically. Mr. Williams gave me a proud thumbs up. Dr. Martinez wiped away tears she didn't try to hide. Behind them sat classmates who'd become friends, co-workers who'd become mentors, professors who'd become parental figures. Each face reflected back the pride my parents had hoarded for Megan alone. They'd all chosen to be here to witness this moment, to celebrate an achievement that mattered to them because I mattered to them. The contrast with those empty reserved seats felt less like a wound and more like a liberation. My parents' absence had created space for an entire community to step forward. Their neglect had taught me to recognize real love when it appeared. Their favoritism had forced me to build my own support system, brick by careful brick, until it stood stronger than any biological bond. As I took my seat on the platform reserved for honor students, I looked out at the sea of families and felt for the first time in my life that I truly belonged somewhere. Not in the family I'd been born into, but in the one I'd built through years of shared moments, mutual respect, and chosen loyalty. The ceremony was about to begin. In minutes, I'd stand at that podium and deliver words that would shatter 22 years of silence. But I wouldn't be speaking from pain anymore. I'd be speaking from power, the power that came from being surrounded by people who saw my worth, even when those who should have seen it first remained blind. The dean approached the microphone and the crowd settled into anticipatory silence. I straightened my shoulders, adjusted my valedictorian sash, and prepared to tell the truth that would set us all free. My parents thought they were enjoying a relaxing spa day. They had no idea they were about to become the most famous absent parents in the country. The gathering storm had arrived, and I was ready to be its thunder. The ceremony unfolded with the practiced precision of university tradition. each element designed to mark our transition from students to graduates. I sat on the elevated platform reserved for honor students, my view encompassing the entire auditorium. From this vantage point, the contrast between filled seats and empty spaces felt even more pronounced. Families clustered together in celebration, while those two chairs I'd reserved in the third row remained conspicuously vacant, like missing teeth in an otherwise perfect smile. Dean Harrison opened with standard welcomes and acknowledgments, her voice carrying the weight of countless similar ceremonies. But nothing about this day felt standard to me. My phone, tucked discreetly in my graduation gown pocket, vibrated with increasing frequency. I'd silenced it, but the persistent buzzing told its own story of a social media storm gathering force beyond these walls. Before we begin our formal program, Dean Harrison announced, "I want to acknowledge the families who've made today possible. Your support, whether financial, emotional, or both, has carried these graduates to this momentous achievement." Polite applause rippled through the audience. I watched my chosen family clap enthusiastically, not knowing the irony of the dean's words in my case. My success had come not from family support, but from its absence, from learning to transform neglect into fuel for achievement. The preliminary speakers took their turns at the podium, offering wisdom about futures, bright with promise and the importance of continued learning. Their words washed over me as I discreetly checked my phone, unable to resist seeing what was happening in the digital world beyond this auditorium. The family group chat Amy monitored had exploded. Extended relatives who'd remained silent for years were finally speaking up. "This is disgraceful," wrote my father's cousin. "How do you miss your daughter's valedictorian speech for a spa day?" Another relative posted screenshots of the viral Twitter thread with a simple comment. "The whole internet is talking about this. Hope the massage was worth it." But it was Megan's social media meltdown that truly captured the unfolding disaster. She'd started deleting posts as negative comments poured in, but the internet had already preserved everything. Someone had created a compilation video showing years of my parents' posts about Megan's minor achievements contrasted with their silence about my major ones. The video had been viewed over 200,000 times in the past hour. "Now we'll hear from our Student Achievement Award winners," Dean Harrison announced, pulling my attention back to the ceremony. The first name called was mine for the Dean's Award for Academic Excellence. As I stood, the auditorium erupted in cheers, far exceeding the polite applause for previous recipients. My section 3 rows of chosen family rose to their feet as one. Grandma Eleanor's whistle pierced the air, a sharp sound of pride that would have mortified my mother had she been here to hear it. I accepted the award, a beautiful crystal plaque that caught the stage lights, and returned to my seat. The weight of it in my hands felt like validation made tangible, but the real validation came from looking out at those standing supporters, their faces bright with genuine pride. Dr. Martinez had tears streaming down her face. Mr. Williams pumped his fist in the air. The Johnsons clutched each other, beaming as if I were their own daughter. Christie Chen summa cum laude." Dean Harrison continued working through the honors list. Each announcement of my achievements drew fresh cheers from my section. By the third award, other families had begun to notice the enthusiastic group whispering among themselves about who all these people might be. My phone screen lit up with a text from Emma. "Local news just picked up the story. They're calling it Spa Day Gate. Your parents have no idea what's coming." Indeed, the spa photos continued their tone-deaf parade across social media. The latest showed my parents and Megan toasting with mimosas time-stamped during the exact moment I was receiving my awards. The caption posted by my mother read, "So blessed to spend quality time with family." The comments beneath it had turned into a virtual battlefield. "Is this the same family whose daughter is giving the valedictorian speech right now?" one stranger wrote. "Imagine being this proud of skipping your kid's graduation," posted another. "Some people shouldn't be parents," came a third, garnering hundreds of likes within minutes. The ceremony continued with department awards and special recognitions. When they announced the Goldwater Scholarship I'd won for undergraduate research, Dr. Rodriguez stood and shouted, "That's our girl." His enthusiasm proved contagious, spreading through the professor section until they were all on their feet. A ripple of curiosity passed through the audience. Who was this student generating such passionate support? Why did she have 3 rows of advocates but empty seats where parents should be? The whispers grew louder, and I caught fragments of conversation. Her parents must be ill. Maybe they're deployed overseas. Such a shame they're missing this. If only they knew the truth that my parents were currently enjoying hot stone massages less than 3 hours away, deliberately missing this moment they'd marked on their calendars months ago. The thought no longer brought pain, just a cold clarity about who they'd always been and who I'd become despite them. Before we hear from our valedictorian, Dean Harrison announced, causing my pulse to quicken, "I want to share something special. This year's valedictorian achieved a perfect 4.0 GPA while working multiple jobs, conducting groundbreaking research, and volunteering over 500 hours in our community. She exemplifies resilience, dedication, and the true spirit of our university." The applause swelled again, but I barely heard it over the blood rushing in my ears. In moments, I'd stand at that podium and deliver words that would forever change my family's public image. The speech cards in my pocket felt heavier than any textbook I'd ever carried. My phone lit up with one final pre-speech notification. Patricia from Channel 7 had texted, "We're rolling. Whatever you're about to say, we're broadcasting it live." The weight of that revelation should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like destiny calling. Every missed recital, every forgotten achievement, every moment of being overlooked had led to this singular opportunity to speak truth into a microphone that would carry it far beyond this auditorium. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dean Harrison's voice cut through my thoughts, "please welcome our valedictorian, Christie Chen." The applause thundered through the space as I stood. My legs felt steady despite the magnitude of the moment. The walk to the podium stretched before me, each step carrying me away from the silent girl who'd accepted neglect and toward the woman who would name it publicly. As I moved across the stage, I caught sight of the news cameras tracking my movement. The red recording lights blinked like eyes witnessing history in the making. My chosen family stood again, their applause drowning out all other sounds. Grandma Eleanor held her phone high live streaming to ensure a permanent record existed. Dr. Martinez pressed her hands to her heart in a gesture of pure love. The Johnsons waved small signs they'd apparently smuggled in reading, "Christie's Real Parents." I reached the podium and adjusted the microphone, taking a moment to survey the packed auditorium. 2,000 faces looked back at me, expectant and unaware they were about to witness something unprecedented. The empty chairs in row 3 seemed to pulse with significance, their vacancy more powerful than any presence could have been. "Oh, thank you, Dean Harrison," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "Graduates, faculty, honored guests, and family." I paused on that last word, letting it hang in the air with all its complex meanings. The audience settled into attentive silence, sensing something important was about to unfold. I pulled out my speech cards, the ones I'd revised that morning with truth instead of platitudes, and set them on the podium with deliberate care. "They say it takes a village to raise a child." I continued, finding my rhythm. "Today, I want to talk about what happens when you have to build your own village because the one you were born into chose to look away." A murmur rippled through the crowd. This wasn't the typical valedictorian fare of bright futures and grateful acknowledgments. This was something rawer, more real, more necessary. The red lights on the cameras seemed to glow brighter, recording every word for posterity. My phone, forgotten in my pocket, continued its silent vibration dance. Somewhere at a spa 3 hours away, my parents remained blissfully unaware that their carefully maintained facade was about to crumble before a global audience. They'd chosen relaxation over responsibility, luxury over love, my sister over me. Now thousands would witness the consequences of those choices. I gripped the edges of the podium, feeling the solid wood beneath my palms. 22 years of silence ended now. 22 years of accepting less than I deserved, of watching them lavish attention on Megan while treating my achievements as inconveniences. 22 years of building my own support system because theirs came with conditions I could never meet. When I was 8 years old, I began my voice growing stronger with each word. I won my first science fair. I stood on a stage much smaller than this one, holding a blue ribbon, scanning the audience for my parents' faces. They weren't there. They'd taken my sister for ice cream instead because she was sad about not making the cheerleading squad. The murmur grew louder. Parents throughout the audience shifted uncomfortably, perhaps thinking of their own missed moments. But I wasn't done. I was just getting started. That empty space in the audience became a familiar sight over the years, I continued. Empty chairs at honor roll ceremonies, empty chairs at National Honor Society inductions, empty chairs at research presentations where I explained innovations that could save lives. And yes, I looked directly into the news camera. Empty chairs at today's graduation ceremony where I stand as valedictorian. The silence in the auditorium was absolute now, 2,000 people holding their collective breath. Somewhere in that silence, I heard Grandma Eleanor whisper fiercely, "Tell them, baby. Tell them all." I smiled, feeling the power of truth filling my lungs, and prepared to do exactly that. Distinguished guests, faculty, fellow graduates, I began again, my voice carrying a new resonance through the hushed auditorium. When Dean Harrison asked me to prepare remarks for today, I wrote the speech you'd expect. I thanked professors and discussed future possibilities. I used words like grateful and blessed, because that's what valedictorians do. We perform gratitude even when our reality tells a different story. I paused, letting my eyes sweep across the crowd before continuing. But this morning, as I prepared for the biggest academic achievement of my life, I received a text. "Too tired to make the drive," it said, from parents who weren't too tired to drive the same distance to a luxury spa, parents who are at this very moment posting champagne toasts on social media while their daughter addresses 2,000 people. Gasps rippled through the audience. Someone in the back shouted, "That's not right!" The sound emboldened me, straightening my spine as I moved deeper into territory valedictorians weren't supposed to explore. "I want to talk about family," I said, gesturing toward the rows of supporters. "Not the family assigned by birth, but the family we choose when birth disappoints us. The professors who stay after class, not because they're paid to, but because they see potential worth nurturing. The employers who become mentors, adjusting schedules so you can study for the MCAT. The grandmother who defies her own son to stand witness when he won't." Eleanor rose slightly in her seat, proud and defiant, a 73-year-old warrior in designer armor. "My name is Christie Chen, and I am the daughter of absence." I continued, each word carefully chosen. "I learned to celebrate alone before I learned to tie my shoes. I discovered that report cards make poor substitutes for parental pride, and that achievement means nothing if no one witnesses it, or so I thought." I lifted the crystal award I'd received earlier, letting stage lights refract through its surfaces. This represents a 4.0 GPA earned while working 3 jobs, but the real achievement isn't in the numbers. It's in learning that love isn't supposed to be earned through perfection. It took me 22 years to understand that when parents require their child to be exceptional just to be seen, the problem isn't with the child. Murmurs of agreement spread through the audience. Parents pulled their own children closer, perhaps examining their own patterns of attention and neglect. The red recording lights on multiple cameras reminded me that this message would travel far beyond these walls. Some of you know the story of the talented sister. I continued, my voice gaining strength. The one who received cars for C's while I got criticism for A minuses. The one whose every stumble warranted family meetings while my successes went unmentioned. I don't blame my sister for being loved. I blame the adults who taught us both that parental affection was a finite resource, and I'd already lost the competition before it began. My hands gripped the podium edges as memories threatened to overwhelm the moment, but I'd come too far to stop now. Do you know what it's like to win a national science competition and have no one to call, to get accepted to your dream medical school and celebrate with your reflection because your parents are too busy planning another celebration for your sister's participation trophy? Tears flowed freely in the audience now. I spotted a woman in the 5th row wiping her eyes while clutching her daughter's hand. A father 3 rows back had removed his glasses to dab at his face. My story was becoming their mirror, reflecting every moment they'd chosen presence over convenience. But here's what I learned, I said, shifting the speech's energy. When your assigned family fails you, the universe sends substitutes. It sends professors like Dr. Sarah Martinez, who noticed a lonely freshman and decided mentorship meant more than office hours. Sarah stood abruptly, tears streaming. "That's my daughter up there," she called out, her voice breaking with emotion. "My daughter." The declaration sent another wave through the crowd. My throat tightened, but I pushed forward. The universe sends employers like Marcus, who gave me flexible schedules and life advice, along with minimum wage. It sends grandmothers like Eleanor, who chose principles over peace, who kept loving even when it cost her son's approval. It sends friends' parents like the Johnsons, who included a stranger in their holiday cards, because they understood chosen family honors no biological boundaries. It sends high school teachers who drive 4 hours on a Saturday because some moments demand witnesses. I looked directly at Mr. Williams, who saluted through his tears. Every person sitting in Section C chose to be here. I continued, gesturing to my 3 rows of supporters, not because DNA demanded it, not because society expected it, but because somewhere along my journey we connected. They saw a girl building herself from scratch and decided to donate bricks. The metaphor landed perfectly. Several professors nodded vigorously, remembering late-night emails and office visits where I'd sought not just academic guidance, but the kind of life wisdom parents typically provided. So, to my fellow graduates whose families fill these seats with pride, cherish them. Not everyone gets love delivered standard with their birth certificate. And to those like me who've learned to parent themselves, who've celebrated in silence and achieved without witnesses, know this: your worth was never dependent on their validation. I pulled out my phone, breaking traditional speech protocol, and held it up. Right now, my parents are posting spa photos. Right now, my sister mocks this boring ceremony on her story. Right now, thousands of strangers on the internet are expressing the outrage my family never felt about their own behavior. The audience stirred, many pulling out their own phones to find the viral posts. I let them look, let them see the evidence of deliberate neglect dressed up as self-care. But right now, I continued, voice rising, I stand before you with a 4.0 GPA acceptance to Johns Hopkins Medical School and a future built on foundations they never laid. Right now, I'm surrounded by the family I earned through kindness, dedication, and refusing to let their indifference define my limits. Applause erupted spontaneously, starting with my section and spreading like wildfire through the auditorium. I waited for it to settle before delivering the next part. They say success is the best revenge, but I disagree. Success for revenge is hollow, driven by bitterness rather than joy. True success comes from building something beautiful where others left ruins. It comes from choosing love when you've been taught indifference, from offering kindness when you've known cruelty, from becoming the parent to yourself that you needed but never had. My voice cracked slightly on that last phrase, years of self-soothing and self-celebration compressed into a single sentence. But I recovered quickly, drawing strength from the faces watching with rapt attention. "I want to establish something today," I announced, pulling out an envelope I'd hidden in my gown. "The Christie Martinez Scholarship for Forgotten Children. Funded initially by money I saved working those 3 jobs, it will support students who achieve despite absent families, students who parent themselves through college because no one else will, students who deserve to know that someone somewhere sees their struggle and values their success." The announcement sent another shockwave through the crowd. Grandma Eleanor shot to her feet, shouting, "I'll match whatever you've saved dollar for dollar." Dr. Martinez stood next. "The biology department will contribute." "The bookstore will sponsor a student," Marcus called out. One by one, members of my chosen family rose with pledges. The scholarship fund grew before my eyes, built by people who understood that sometimes the best family is the one you find along the way. The news cameras captured every pledge, every tear, every moment of collective decision to support forgotten children everywhere. "This is what happens when we choose love over blood," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "This is what happens when we refuse to let neglect have the last word. We don't just survive, we thrive. We don't just graduate, we become valedictorians. We don't just dream of medical school, we get accepted to the best program in the country." The standing ovation started in Section C, but spread like dominoes through the entire auditorium. 2,000 people rose to their feet, applauding not just my achievements, but the triumph of chosen family over biological failure. Parents hugged their children tighter, perhaps vowing silently never to assume their presence was optional. But I wasn't finished. The most important part remained unspoken. I raised my hand for silence, waiting as the crowd slowly settled back into their seats. The energy in the room had shifted from passive listening to active participation in something larger than a typical graduation speech. "There's one more thing," I said, pulling out the legal document I'd tucked beneath my speech cards. "Effective. Monday, my legal name will be Christie Martinez, honoring the woman who showed me that mothers are made through choice, not just childbirth." Sarah's sob echoed through the auditorium. She covered her face with both hands, shoulders shaking with the force of her emotion. Her husband wrapped an arm around her, but she broke free, moving toward the stage with determined steps. "Some of you might wonder why I've shared this painful history so publicly," I continued as Sarah climbed the stage stairs. "It's not for revenge or sympathy. It's for every child sitting in this audience who feels unseen, every graduate who achieved in silence, every person who's been told they expect too much from family. You don't expect too much. You deserve to be celebrated, witnessed, chosen." Sarah reached me then, and I abandoned protocol, completely turning from the podium to embrace the woman who'd become my mother through everything but birth. The audience erupted again, their applause thunderous as we held each other on stage, 2 women who'd found family in unexpected places. When we finally parted, both tear-stained but smiling, I returned to the microphone for my conclusion. "To the parents who showed up today, thank you. Your presence matters more than any gift. To my fellow graduates, remember that family isn't just about shared DNA. It's about shared moments, mutual support, and choosing to witness each other's victories." I looked directly into the primary news camera, knowing my next words would reach far beyond this auditorium. "And to everyone who didn't show up today, who chose comfort over commitment, who decided a spa day mattered more than a daughter's moment, I want you to know something. Your absence taught me to fill empty chairs with people who actually want to be there. Your indifference taught me to value genuine care. Your favoritism taught me to love myself enough for 2 parents who couldn't manage it for 1 child." The silence that followed felt sacred. 2,000 people holding space for truth that rarely got spoken so plainly. Then from somewhere in the back, slow clapping began. It built gradually, joined by whistles and cheers until the entire auditorium shook with the force of collective approval. I stood at that podium, no longer the forgotten daughter, but the chosen one, chosen by professors and employers, by friends' parents and estranged grandmothers, by everyone who'd seen my worth, when those who should have seen it first remained blind. The empty chairs in row 3 no longer symbolized absence. They symbolized freedom space for the family I'd built through love rather than obligation. As the ovation continued, I thought about my parents at their spa, probably halfway through their second bottle of champagne by now. They had no idea their carefully maintained image was crumbling in real-time broadcast to thousands who would remember this story long after the ceremony ended. They'd chosen temporary pleasure over permanent memory, and now that choice would define them far more than it had ever defined me. The applause gradually faded as I raised my hand, once more signaling I had more to say. The audience settled with an anticipation that felt electric, every eye fixed on the podium where I stood preparing to deliver the words I'd rehearsed in my mind for years, but never dared speak aloud. "Now," I said, looking directly into the center camera's red recording light, "I want to address everyone who couldn't make it today." The auditorium fell into complete silence. Even the rustling of programs stopped as 2,000 people recognized this moment's significance. I wasn't speaking to them anymore. I was speaking through them past them to 3 people lounging in spa robes 3 hours away. Mom, Dad, Megan. I began, my voice carrying steady and clear. "I know you're busy right now. The hot stone massage at 2:30 can't be rescheduled. The wine tasting at 4 requires your full attention, and someone needs to document every moment for social media, ensuring the world knows how blessed you are to have family time together." Several audience members pulled out their phones, undoubtedly checking the Instagram stories I referenced. Soft gasps rippled through the crowd as they found the tone-deaf posts in real time. "While you're celebrating each other, let me tell you what you're missing." I continued, my tone conversational, yet pointed. "You're missing your daughter standing as valedictorian before 2,000 witnesses. You're missing the 7 academic awards I've received today, each one earned through nights when I chose textbooks over sleep. You're missing the announcement that I've been accepted to Johns Hopkins Medical School, something I never told you because I knew you'd find a way to make it about Megan's community college struggles." A woman in the audience whispered loudly enough to carry, "Johns Hopkins! My God, that's incredible." I smiled slightly at the reaction, the kind of maternal pride that should have come from my own mother. "I want to thank you for teaching me resilience, though I doubt that was your intention. Every missed science fair taught me to validate myself. Every ignored achievement taught me to set internal standards, rather than seeking external approval. Every birthday forgotten in favor of Megan's drama of the week taught me that self-reliance is the greatest gift a neglected child can develop." My hands found the stack of note cards I'd originally written the safe speech full of platitudes. I held them up for the audience to see. This was my first draft. "Thank the university, inspire my peers, honor my family." Standard valedictorian material. But then you texted about being too tired, and I realized I was tired too. Tired of pretending your neglect was normal. Tired of making excuses for inexcusable behavior. Tired of shrinking my light because it might outshine Megan's carefully cultivated mediocrity. I tore the cards in half, the ripping sound sharp in the microphone. The symbolic gesture drew applause, but I pressed on without acknowledging it. "Let me tell you about the daughter you never bothered to know," I said, warming to my subject. "I speak 3 languages, none of which you're aware of, because you never asked about my coursework. I've published research that might revolutionize water access in developing nations, but you wouldn't know because science makes your eyes glaze over unless Megan's attempting it for the 3rd time. I volunteer at the free clinic downtown where I've already saved lives through early detection screenings. I mentor young girls in STEM, showing them what's possible when you stop waiting for permission to excel. I've built a network of chosen family so strong that 3 rows of this auditorium are filled with people who drove hours to be here while you couldn't manage 3. Dr. Martinez called out, 4 hours and I'd do it again. Thank you, Mom, I said, pointedly emphasizing the title, because that's what you've been to me, Dr. Martinez. A mother who noticed when I struggled with organic chemistry and stayed after hours to help. A mother who celebrated when I aced the MCAT. A mother who will sit in the front row at my medical school graduation because she understands that showing up is love's minimum requirement. The comparison hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. Several parents in the audience shifted uncomfortably, perhaps seeing their own patterns reflected in my story. Dad, I continued, addressing the camera again. Remember when I asked you to teach me to drive? You were too busy teaching Megan for the 4th time after her multiple accidents. So Mr. Johnson stepped in, spending weekends in empty parking lots with patience you never showed. He taught me parallel parking and life lessons proving fathers are made through presence, not just DNA. Tom Johnson stood briefly saluting me with tears on his weathered face. And Megan, I said, allowing a slight edge into my voice. Sweet, spoiled Megan, you're probably deleting Instagram comments right now wondering how my boring graduation became your social media nightmare. Let me clarify something. I don't hate you. I pity you. They crippled you with conditional love while starving me with its absence. You'll spend your life needing constant validation because you've never had to earn anything. I'll spend mine changing the world because I learned early that nobody would hand me anything. My phone face up on the podium lit with incoming messages. The family group chat Amy monitored was exploding with extended relatives' reactions. I glimpsed fragments. Is this really happening? Someone needs to stop her. No, someone needed to stop them years ago. You know what the saddest part is? I asked, returning to my main point. I would have forgiven everything for one genuine moment of recognition. One time when you looked at me and saw Christie instead of Megan's sister. One instance of choosing my achievement over her convenience. But that moment never came, and now it never will. I picked up the acceptance letter I'd brought, holding it high. Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. Do you know what this means? 8 years from now, I'll be Dr. Christie Martinez. I'll save lives, advance medical knowledge, and mentor other forgotten daughters. I'll do it all without you, just like I've done everything else. The crowd erupted again, but I raised my voice over the applause. I'm changing my name legally, as I mentioned, but I want you to know why. It's not spite. It's clarity. Martinez represents choice love freely given rather than obligated. It represents Professor Martinez, who saw potential where you saw inconvenience. It represents the family I'm building, where showing up isn't negotiable and love isn't rationed based on perceived potential. I pulled out my phone and showed it to the audience. Right now, I have 47 messages from classmates at the spa you're enjoying. They're recording your reactions as you realize your spa day has gone viral. They're capturing the moment you understand that your absence today will define you forever in the court of public opinion. Good. Let everyone see what prioritizing comfort over commitment looks like. A student in the front row held up their phone showing a Twitter feed rapidly updating with clips of my speech. The hashtags chosen family and valedictorian truth were already trending. But here's the thing. I continued, softening my tone slightly. Your failure freed me. Your neglect taught me to parent myself with compassion you never showed. Your favoritism forced me to find mentors who guided without bias. Your absence created space for an entire community to step forward. I gestured to Section C, my 3 rows of warriors. Every person there chose to witness this moment. Professor Rodriguez drove through a thunderstorm last night to be here. My freshman RA rescheduled her wedding planning appointment. Marcus closed his business on the busiest day of the week. They showed up because I mattered to them in ways I never mattered to you. Christie, we love you. Emma's voice rang out, breaking protocol but perfectly timed. I love you too, I responded, meaning it for everyone who'd filled the void my parents created. So thank you, Mom and Dad, for the greatest gift you never meant to give, I said, building to my conclusion. Thank you for teaching me that family is action, not accident. Thank you for showing me early that I'd need to build my own support system. Thank you for the neglect that became my fuel, the abandonment that became my strength, the favoritism that became my freedom. I paused, letting the weight of gratitude wrapped in truth settle over the auditorium. I hope the spa is everything you dreamed of. I hope the Instagram likes validate your choices. I hope Megan's participation trophy from last month continues to bring you more joy than my medical degree will, because while you're missing this moment, I'm not missing anything. I have everything I need right here in this room. The standing ovation that followed felt different from the previous ones. This carried the weight of collective witness, 2,000 people acknowledging truth rarely spoken so publicly. Parents hugged their children tighter. Students called home. The cameras captured it all, broadcasting a story that would inspire some and shame others. Whoa, 25,000, someone shouted from the crowd. I turned to see a man in an expensive suit standing in the back row. 25,000 for your scholarship fund. My daughter went through the same thing. Someone should have stood up like this years ago. The pledge started an avalanche. Numbers flew from different sections as audience members committed to supporting forgotten children. 50,000, 75, 100. The scholarship fund grew before my eyes, built on the foundation of truth and the recognition that too many children achieve despite their families, rather than because of them. I stood at the podium, no longer the girl who celebrated alone, but the woman who turned isolation into inspiration. Somewhere my parents were discovering that their carefully curated image had shattered beyond repair. They'd saved money on gas to miss my graduation. The internet would ensure they paid in reputation for the rest of their lives. But I wasn't thinking about them anymore. I was thinking about the future Dr. Christie Martinez, surrounded by chosen family, changing the world one patient at a time. They could keep their spa days and favoritism. I had everything they'd never thought to give: unconditional love, genuine support, and the knowledge that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when it matters. The thunder of applause seemed endless, rolling through the auditorium in waves that crashed against the walls and rolled back again. I stood at the podium for a moment longer, absorbing the sight of 2,000 people on their feet, many wiping away tears, others filming with phones held high to capture history in the making. Then, with as much dignity as I could manage on shaking legs, I walked back to my seat. Dean Harrison approached the microphone, visibly moved. She cleared her throat twice before speaking. In 30 years of academic ceremonies, I have never... She paused, collecting herself. Christie, thank you for reminding us why we do this work. Why showing up matters. Why chosen family deserves as much honor as biological bonds. The ceremony continued, but the energy had fundamentally shifted. Every speaker who followed referenced my words in some way. The student body president abandoned his prepared remarks entirely, instead speaking about his own grandmother who'd raised him when his parents couldn't. The alumni speaker talked about finding mentors who became surrogate parents. My truth had opened a floodgate, giving others permission to acknowledge their own complicated family stories. My phone vibrated continuously in my pocket, a symphony of notifications I couldn't check while on stage. But Emma, seated in the graduate section, was monitoring the digital explosion with wide eyes. She caught my gaze and mouthed, "It's everywhere." When the ceremony finally concluded, I barely made it 3 steps before being engulfed by my chosen family. Grandma Eleanor reached me first, her embrace fierce enough to crack ribs. "You brilliant, brave girl," she whispered in my ear. "I've waited 22 years to see you use your voice like that. Your grandfather would be so proud." Dr. Martinez was next, and she wasn't even trying to hide her tears. "My daughter," she kept repeating, "my brilliant daughter." Her husband wrapped us both in a group hug, creating the family sandwich I'd always craved but never experienced. Christie. Patricia from Channel 7 pushed through the crowd with professional determination. I've covered hundreds of graduations. Nothing like this. Can we get that interview now? The station wants to run a full segment tonight. Before I could answer, my phone rang with a number I recognized but had learned to dread. Mom. I held it up for the camera to see letting it ring as her photo, a family portrait that cropped me half out of frame, filled the screen. "You going to answer that?" Patricia asked. "After 22 years of silence from them, they can wait 5 more minutes," I replied, declining the call. It rang again immediately. This time, Dad. Decline. Then Megan. Decline. The pattern continued as Patricia's cameraman captured each rejected attempt at contact. "They're panicking." Amy appeared at my elbow, showing me her phone. "The family chat is in total meltdown. Your mom is claiming she's having chest pains. Your dad's threatening to disown you. Megan's crying about her ruined reputation." Interesting how they found the energy to react when it affects them, I observed, but not enough energy to drive 3 hours for my achievement. Marcus pushed through the crowd, still wearing his bookstore name tag. "Christie, you need to see this." He showed me his phone where the bookstore's social media had exploded with comments. People are ordering books on chosen family and childhood neglect by the dozens. They're asking if you have a memoir. Publishers are already reaching out. "Can we get some air?" I asked, suddenly overwhelmed by the press of bodies and emotions. My inner circle formed a protective barrier as we moved toward the exit. Other graduates high-fived me as we passed. Parents nodded respectfully. One mother grabbed my hand briefly, whispering, "My daughter needed to hear that. Thank you." Outside, the May sunshine felt like freedom itself. News vans had multiplied during the ceremony, their satellites reaching toward a sky that suddenly felt full of possibility. But between me and those vans stood an obstacle I hadn't anticipated: Megan. She looked destroyed. Mascara streaked her cheeks in black rivers, her perfect spa hair now disheveled from the drive. Behind her, I could see my parents' car, both of them still inside, probably strategizing damage control. "How could you—" Megan wailed loud enough to draw attention from nearby graduates. "How could you humiliate us like that? Do you know what people are saying? My influencer contract got canceled while you were giving your little speech. Brands are dropping me. You've ruined everything." The irony of her accusation might have been funny if it wasn't so tragically predictable. I stood there surrounded by people who loved me, facing the sister who'd never seen me as anything but competition for resources she'd already won. "I ruined everything," I repeated calmly. "Megan, I told the truth. If the truth ruins you, that's not my fault." "It wasn't the truth," she shrieked. "Mom and Dad love you. They just show it differently." "Name one time," I challenged. "One birthday they celebrated. One achievement they acknowledged. One moment they chose me over you." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Behind her, I saw my mother exit the car, her face a mask of fury barely contained by social conditioning. My father followed, his expression darker than I'd ever seen. "We need to talk," my mother hissed, grabbing for my arm. "Privately, now!" Dr. Martinez stepped between us. She doesn't go anywhere without support. Whatever you need to say, you can say in front of her real family. The word real hit like a slap. My mother recoiled, then rallied with the narcissistic rage I'd learned to recognize but never confront. "How dare you? I carried her for 9 months. I gave birth to her." "And then what?" Eleanor's voice cut through the tension. "What did you do after that, besides systematically favor one child while neglecting the other? Besides teaching Christie her worth was less than Megan's? Besides missing every important moment of her life for spa days and shopping trips?" "Mother, stay out of this," my father warned. I stopped being your mother the day you stopped being Christie's father, Eleanor shot back, which was approximately 22 years ago by my count. The gathering crowd of graduates and families provided an audience my parents hadn't expected. Their usual tactics of gaslighting and denial wouldn't work with 50 witnesses holding phone cameras. The court of public opinion was in session, and they were losing badly. "You ungrateful little brat," my mother spat, abandoning any pretense of composure. "After everything we've done for you." "What exactly have you done for me?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Please, I'm serious. List your contributions to my success. I'll wait." The silence stretched uncomfortably. Even Megan looked away, unable to manufacture lies in front of so many witnesses. "We fed you, clothed you, kept a roof over your head." My father finally exploded. "Congratulations on meeting the legal minimum requirements for not getting arrested for child neglect," I responded. "Would you like a participation trophy? Oh wait, those are only for Megan." Someone in the crowd snorted, then another. Soon nervous laughter rippled through the onlookers as the absurdity of the scene became apparent. Parents who'd skipped graduation to spa were now claiming parental rights they'd never exercised. "The security footage," I said, suddenly remembering. "Someone sent me security footage from the spa. Would you like me to share what you were saying about my boring ceremony while getting your hot stone massage?" I believe the exact quote was, "At least we don't have to pretend to understand her science stuff." My mother's face went white. "You're lying." I pulled out my phone and found the video sent by a spa employee who'd seen the viral posts. Their laughter echoed tinnily through the speaker as they toasted missing my graduation. The crowd's murmur turned angry, protective of me in ways my parents had never been. "You need to fix this," my father demanded. "Go online right now and tell everyone you exaggerated. Tell them we're a happy family." "But we're not," I said simply. "We never were. You had one daughter you loved and one you tolerated. I just finally admitted it publicly." "We'll cut you off," he threatened. "No more money from us?" The laughter burst from me before I could stop it. "What money? You haven't given me a penny since I turned 18. I've worked 3 jobs through college while you funded Megan's every whim. You already cut me off financially. Today, I just returned the emotional favor." Patricia from Channel 7 had worked her way through the crowd, her cameraman capturing every second. "Mr. and Mrs. Chen, would you like to comment on why you chose a spa day over your daughter's valedictorian speech?" They turned on her with synchronized fury, but she stood her ground. "The public wants to know how parents miss such a momentous occasion, especially when their daughter maintained a perfect GPA while working multiple jobs." "We don't talk to press," my father growled. "But you do talk to social media," Patricia countered smoothly. "Your wife has posted 17 times today about your blessed family time. Strange blessing that excludes a daughter achieving extraordinary things." My mother's face cycled through emotions, calculable rage, then forced calm as she realized the cameras were rolling. "Christie has always been dramatic. She's twisting things for attention." "The university disagrees," Dean Harrison's voice interrupted. She'd apparently followed us outside, flanked by several administrators. "Christie is one of our most accomplished graduates. 7 awards today alone. Perfect GPA. Accepted to the nation's top medical school. If she wanted attention, she earned it through excellence, not drama." The administrative support felt like another wall building between my past and future. My parents stood exposed, their carefully maintained image shredded beyond repair. Megan wept dramatically, but even her tears felt performative, designed for sympathy rather than genuine emotion. "You're going to regret this," my mother hissed, abandoning any pretense of maternal concern. "When you need us." "I've never had you when I needed you," I interrupted. "Why would that change now? You missed birthdays, holidays, achievements, milestones. You taught me to need nothing from you. Consider this graduation day's final lesson." Campus security appeared attracted by the growing crowd. "Is there a problem here?" the lead officer asked. No problem, I said clearly. My biological family was just leaving. They have spa appointments to keep. The dismissal landed like a physical blow. My father's fists clenched, and for a moment, I wondered if he'd break character completely. But the cameras held him in check. The witnesses held him accountable. The uniform held him back. This isn't over, he promised darkly. You're right, I agreed. It's just beginning. Every time someone Googles our family name, they'll find today's truth. Every time Megan applies for an influencer partnership, they'll see the sister who mocked my graduation while getting a facial. Every time you try to play perfect parents on social media, someone will link to my speech. You're right, Dad. This isn't over. It's forever. Grandma Eleanor stepped forward, steel in her spine and voice. You should leave now. Before Christie reveals more truths you'd rather keep hidden, like the adoption you've concealed for 22 years. The crowd gasped. I turned to Eleanor in shock. This revelation news even to me, but she wasn't done. Oh yes, she continued, addressing the cameras now. Christie was adopted as a baby. They never told her, of course. Easier to explain the favoritism if she never knew she wasn't biologically theirs. I have the paperwork, Christie, whenever you're ready to see it. The final bomb destroyed what little composure remained. My mother, caught in a lie so fundamental it recontextualized everything, grabbed my father's arm. They retreated toward their car, Megan trailing behind, still sobbing about her ruined reputation. But my mother turned back for one last volley. You'll die alone, she spat. Without family, without love, without anyone who truly cares. I looked around at the circle of people surrounding me. Professors who'd nurtured my mind, employers who'd supported my goals, friends who'd become siblings, a grandmother who chose principles over peace, a new mother in Dr. Martinez who'd shown me what maternal love actually looked like. You're wrong, I said loud enough for everyone to hear. I'm surrounded by family. They just chose me instead of being stuck with me, and that makes all the difference. The three of them climbed into their car and peeled out of the parking lot tires, squealing in their haste to escape accountability. The crowd began dispersing, but not before many stopped to hug me, share their own stories, or simply offer support. That was magnificent. Patricia said, her professional composure cracked by genuine admiration. Would you consider a longer interview, maybe a documentary? This story needs to be told completely. I nodded, exhausted but exhilarated. The truth had set me free, but freedom came with its own responsibilities. The scholarship fund needed organizing. The medical school journey needed beginning. The chosen family who'd supported me needed celebrating. But first things first, Dr. Martinez said, reading my mind as always. Lunch with your real family, then we can tackle the rest of the world. As we walked toward the restaurant where she'd made reservations weeks ago, confident I'd have reason to celebrate, my phone showed 847 unread messages. The world wanted to hear more, to understand how neglect became fuel, how abandonment became achievement, how a forgotten daughter became an unforgettable woman. But first, I wanted to sit with people who'd shown up, to toast with those who'd witnessed, to celebrate with family who'd chosen me when DNA had failed. The messages could wait. The interviews could wait. Even the scholarship fund could wait. For the first time in 22 years, I had nowhere else I'd rather be than right here, surrounded by love that wasn't obligated but offered freely. My parents had given me life, but withheld living. My chosen family had given me both. 2 hours later, the celebration lunch had wound down, and I found myself walking back to campus with Emma to retrieve a few things from my dorm room. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot, where graduates and families were still milling about, taking photos and saying goodbyes. That's when I saw her again. Megan sat on the curb near the humanities, building her designer dress, wrinkled and stained with mascara tears. She looked smaller, somehow deflated like a balloon after a party. The crowd that usually surrounded her, drawn by her cultivated social media presence and our parents' money, had vanished. She was utterly alone. I could have walked past. Should have, probably, but something in her posture, the complete defeat of it, made me pause. Emma grabbed my arm. Christie, no, you don't owe her anything. She was right. I didn't owe Megan anything, but maybe I owed myself the chance to close this chapter properly. Give me 5 minutes, I told Emma. Stay close. Emma nodded, positioning herself by a nearby bench where she could intervene if needed. I approached Megan slowly, like one might approach a wounded animal that could still bite. Wait, 3 brands, Megan said without looking up. 3 brands dropped me in the last hour, plus the 2 from earlier. My manager says I'm toxic now, that my association with family drama makes me unmarketable. She laughed bitterly. Family drama, like it's some reality show plot and not our actual lives. I sat down on the curb, leaving space between us. Did you really not know it was graduation day? Megan finally looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw something genuine in her eyes. Not the calculated emotions she performed for cameras, but real confusion and pain. Of course I knew. Mom had it circled on 3 different calendars. She just said... She trailed off. I said what? That you wouldn't care. That you never cared about family things, that you were too focused on your studies to want us there. She said the spa trip was a reward for me finishing my associate's degree, that we'd celebrate with you later when you weren't so busy. The manipulation was so classic, it almost made me laugh. Of course, they'd twisted it, making my achievement about Megan's feelings, my milestone about her reward. And you believed that... Why wouldn't I? Megan's voice rose defensively before crumbling. You've always been so independent. You never seemed to need them the way I did. I never seemed to need them because they made it clear my needs didn't matter, I said quietly. Every time I asked for support, they were busy with you. Every achievement I shared got redirected to your struggles. I learned to stop needing them because needing them hurt too much. Megan pulled her knees to her chest, making herself even smaller. They ruined me, didn't they? All that attention, all that money, all that constant validation. They made me weak. I considered her words. There was truth in them, but also a dangerous deflection of responsibility. They didn't force you to mock my graduation on Instagram. They didn't make you post champagne toasts while I gave my speech. Those were your choices. I know, she whispered. I think I hated you. The admission hung between us like a physical thing. I waited, letting her find the words. Not hate exactly, but resentment. They held you up as this impossible standard. Christie would never need a tutor. Christie wouldn't crash a car. Christie got another scholarship. But then they'd give me everything while giving you nothing, and it was confusing. Like, if you were so perfect, why didn't they love you? And you never questioned that logic, I asked. I was a kid, Megan said defensively, and then I was a teenager who benefited from it. And then I was an adult who... God, Christie, I don't know how to be anything else. I've built my entire identity on being the favorite daughter. Without that, what am I? It was the first truly introspective question I'd ever heard her ask. Part of me wanted to comfort her, but the larger part remembered every birthday she'd stolen, every achievement she'd minimized, every moment she'd participated in my erasure. You're 24 years old with an associate's degree and no job, I said bluntly. You're someone who's lived off our parents' favoritism without developing any real skills. You're a person who just lost influencer contracts because your true character got exposed. But you're also someone who can choose to change. The question is, will you? Megan flinched at the harsh assessment, but didn't deny any of it. Did you mean what you said? That you don't hate me? I don't hate you, I confirmed, but I don't like you either. You've been cruel to me our entire lives, Megan, not just complicit in their neglect, but actively cruel. Remember when you accidentally deleted my college essays, when you told my prom date I was too boring to bother with? When you filmed me crying after they missed my National Honor Society induction and posted it with laughing emojis? Each incident landed like a blow. Megan curled tighter into herself. I was jealous, she admitted. You were everything I wasn't. Smart, driven, accomplished. Even with all their attention, I knew I was the consolation prize. They loved me because I was easy. You were extraordinary. And yet they chose easy over extraordinary every time, as I pointed out. What does that say about their values? A car pulled into the lot and we both tensed, but it was just another family loading graduation presents, not our parents coming back for round two. The relief on both our faces was telling. They're at home, Megan said. Damage control mode, mom's calling relatives, trying to spin the story. Dad's threatening to sue the news station. They've already hired a PR firm. A PR firm. I couldn't help but laugh. They wouldn't pay for my SAT prep, but they'll pay for reputation management. The irony's not lost on me, Megan said. $500 an hour to try to convince people they're good parents. They could have just been good parents, would have been cheaper. It was the most insight I'd ever heard from her, the favorite daughter finally seeing the price of that position. But self-awareness without action meant nothing, and Megan had a lifetime of inaction to overcome. What did Grandma Eleanor mean, Megan asked suddenly, about adoption? I shrugged. No idea. First time hearing of it, but it would explain a lot, wouldn't it? Why they could so easily favor their real daughter over the adopted one. I'm not their real daughter either, Megan said quietly. Real daughters don't get paid to exist. Real daughters develop actual personalities and skills. Real daughters don't need constant validation to feel worthy of love. They made me into a performance Christie. At least you gotta become a person. The revelation sat heavy between us. Two daughters both damaged in different ways by the same toxic favoritism. One neglected into fierce independence, the other coddled into helpless dependence. Neither of us had received what we actually needed, unconditional love balanced with appropriate expectations. I should apologize, Megan said finally, for everything, but sorry, feels too small for 22 years of cruelty. It is too small, I agreed. Apologies mean nothing without change. And frankly, Megan, I don't believe you're capable of real change. This moment of clarity will pass and you'll go back to being whoever they pay you to be. Because that's easier than doing the work. She looked like I'd slapped her. That's harsh. It's honest. Something this family's never been good at. I stood brushing off my graduation gown. I hope I'm wrong. I hope you prove me wrong, but I won't hold my breath waiting. Emma approached, sensing the conversation was ending. Christie, the news crew wants to know if you're still available for the extended interview. I am, I said, then looked back at Megan one last time. Good luck figuring out who you are without their money. Maybe you'll surprise us both. As I walked away, Megan called out, Christie, wait. I turned back to see her standing mascara-stained, but somehow more real than I'd ever seen her. I watched your speech, on my phone after we left. I finally understood why they were so threatened by you. You're going to change the world. I'm going to try, I said simply, and I'm going to be, a cautionary tale, the spoiled sister in your inspiring life story. I considered the question seriously. That's up to you. You can be the cautionary tale who stayed spoiled or the redemption arc who changed. Your choice. But either way, it won't be my story anymore. I'm done defining myself in relation to you or them. Megan nodded slowly, understanding perhaps, for the first time, that her actions had consequences beyond our parents' protection. The adoption thing, will you look into it? Probably, I said, but it doesn't change anything. They chose to raise me. They chose to favor you. They chose to skip my graduation. Biology doesn't excuse any of that. No, Megan agreed. It doesn't. We stood there, two sisters who'd never really been sisters, finally seeing each other clearly. The golden child tarnished by reality, the scapegoat transformed into success. Neither role had been our choice, but what we did next would be. Goodbye, Megan, I said, meaning it as more than a farewell to this conversation. Bye, Christie, she replied, understanding the finality. As Emma and I walked toward the news van, I felt something shift inside me. The last tie to my old identity, the forgotten daughter defined by neglect, had been severed. Whatever relationship Megan and I might have in the future, if any, would be built on new ground. Truth ground, reality ground. "You okay?" Emma asked. Yeah, I said, surprised to find it was true. "I think I finally am." Behind us, Megan remained on the curb typing something on her phone. Later, I'd learned she'd posted a simple message. "I've been a terrible sister. Christie deserved better. I'm gonna try to deserve better too." It got fewer likes than her usual content, but more authenticity than she'd ever shown before. The news van waited Patricia, eager to dive deeper into a story that had captured the nation's attention. But first, I looked back one more time at the campus, where I'd transformed from nobody's daughter into my own woman. The buildings looked the same, but everything had changed. My parents were probably huddled with their PR team crafting statements no one would believe. Megan was confronting 24 years of manufactured identity, and I was stepping into a future where chosen family meant more than blood, where truth trumped comfort, where being forgotten had become my greatest gift. The parking lot breakdown was over. The breakthrough had begun. The extended interview with Channel 7 had gone viral within hours, racking up millions of views as Patricia skillfully drew out the full story of systematic neglect and chosen family. By evening, my phone had become unusable from the constant notifications. Book agents, documentary producers, morning show bookers, all wanting a piece of what they called the most powerful graduation speech in history. Emma fielded calls while I sat in Dr. Martinez's living room, trying to process how a day that started with rejection had transformed into something unprecedented. That's when the doorbell rang. Dr. Martinez peered through the peephole and stepped back, her face grave. "It's them, all three." My parents and Megan stood on the doorstep, their spa day relaxation replaced by something darker. Through the window, I could see a small crowd gathering on the sidewalk. Word had spread about where I was staying, and neighbors had emerged to witness whatever confrontation was coming. "You don't have to let them in," Dr. Martinez said firmly. "This is my home. They're not welcome here." But I was done hiding, done letting them control the narrative through absence. "Let them in, but call campus security to wait outside just in case." Dr. Martinez nodded, pulling out her phone while her husband opened the door. My parents entered like they owned the place, their entitlement unchanged by the day's humiliation. Megan followed, looking smaller than she had in the parking lot, clutching a manila folder. "You need to fix this. Now." My mother's opening salvo came without greeting or pretense. "Our phones won't stop ringing. Robert's job is threatening suspension. The country club has put our membership under review. You've destroyed everything we've built." "Everything you built," I repeated, incredulous. "You mean the facade of being good parents? The illusion that you treated your daughters equally, that house of cards was always gonna fall." My father's face had turned an alarming shade of purple. "You ungrateful little—" He caught himself noticing Emma recording with her phone. The awareness that everything might end up online had become their leash, the only thing keeping their worst impulses in check. "We'll sue you," he said instead, his voice low and threatening. "Defamation? Emotional distress? Our lawyer says we have a strong case." Grandma Eleanor laughed from her position by the fireplace. She'd arrived an hour earlier with boxes of documentation. "Please do, Robert. Discovery would be fascinating. All those financial records showing exactly how much you spent on each child. The paper trail of Christie working 3 jobs while you paid for Megan's 3rd attempt at freshman year. The emails where you discussed skipping graduations, birthdays, achievements. Sue her. I dare you." The threat of legal exposure deflated him slightly, but my mother rallied. "We came here to give you one chance. Retract everything. Post a video saying you exaggerated for attention. We'll forgive this episode and move forward as a family." "As a family?" I stood facing them fully for the first time since the speech. We've never been a family. We've been four people sharing a house where two of them mattered, and two of them existed to make those two feel special. That's not family. That's a hierarchy. You got everything you needed, my mother insisted. Food, shelter, clothing. Prison inmates get those things, I interrupted. Are we setting the bar that low? Basic survival needs met, so I should be grateful. While Megan got cars and trips and designer clothes and unconditional support, I didn't ask for those things. Megan suddenly burst out, surprising everyone. I didn't ask to be the favorite. No, I agreed. But you accepted it, benefited from it, rubbed it in my face every chance you got. You didn't ask for favoritism, but you weaponized it. Megan flinched, but didn't deny it. She held out the manila folder with shaking hands. I brought this. Thought you should see it. I took the folder, warily opening it to find adoption papers dated 22 years ago. My original name wasn't Christie Chen. It was Christina Markov, born to a teenage mother in Seattle. The papers detailed the closed adoption, the hefty fee my parents had paid to a private agency the agreement signed. You knew, I said, looking at my parents. You've always known I wasn't biologically yours, and you never told me. We were protecting you, my mother said, but the words rang hollow. We didn't want you to feel different. You didn't want me to feel different. I laughed, but it was sharp, bitter. You made me feel different every single day. Every time you chose Megan over me, every achievement you ignored, every milestone you missed, I've felt different my entire life. At least knowing I'm adopted explains why. We never... My father struggled with words for perhaps the first time in his life. You got a designer baby, Eleanor said coldly, picked from a catalog. Blonde hair, blue eyes, promising genetic background, like ordering a pet. Then your miracle happened, you got pregnant with Megan naturally, and suddenly the purchased child didn't shine as bright as the biological one. That's not true, my mother shrieked. We loved Christie. Loved. Past tense. Interesting choice, Dr. Martinez observed from her protective position near me. Not, we love Christie, but we loved. When exactly did that love end? When she started talking, walking, achieving things that threatened Megan's position as a special one? The question hung in the air unanswered because we all knew the truth. The love, if it had ever existed, had been conditional from the start, contingent on me being less than Megan, requiring less than Megan, accepting less than Megan. We did our best, my father said, finally the anger replaced by something that might have been shame if he were capable of it. No, I said firmly, you did not do your best. Your best would have included showing up. Your best would have meant equal treatment. Your best would have recognized that children aren't accessories you can ignore when they become inconvenient. You did the minimum, and for Megan, you did the maximum. That disparity is not your best, it's your worst. So what do you want? My mother's voice had turned calculating. Money, is that what this is about? Fine. We'll give you what we spent on Megan's education. Will that make you happy? The insult of it, the assumption that money could fix 22 years of emotional neglect made me laugh. I don't want your money. I never did. I wanted your presence, your pride, your love without conditions. But that window closed years ago. Then what? My father demanded. What's the point of all this public humiliation if you don't want anything from us? I want you to leave, I said simply. I want you to go home and live with the consequences of your choices. Every whisper at the country club, every canceled social invitation, every time someone Googles your names and finds the truth. I want you to understand what it feels like to be judged and found wanting the way you judge me my entire life. You're enjoying this, Bado, my mother accused. You're enjoying our pain. No, I said honestly. I'm not enjoying anything about this, but I'm not protecting you from it either. You created this situation with 22 years of choices. I just stopped hiding those choices for you. Campus security knocked on the door, checking if they were needed. The reminder of witnesses of accountability seemed to finally penetrate my parents' bubble of denial. Oh, fine, my mother spat. You want to be done with us? We'll be done with you. Don't come crying when what? I interrupted. When I need parents, I've gotten this far without them. When I get married, my real family will walk me down the aisle. When I have children, they'll have grandparents who actually show up. There's nothing you can threaten me with, because you've already taken everything and given nothing. Megan stepped forward. Can I say something? Everyone turned to her, this golden child whose shine had tarnished in a single day. I was wrong, she said, looking at me directly, about everything, about you being the lucky one, about them being good parents, about deserving what I got while you got nothing. She turned to our parents. You ruined us both, just in different ways. Christie survived despite you. I'm not sure I can. Megan. My mother reached for her, but Megan stepped back. No, I'm done too. Not the way Christie is, because I don't have her strength. But I need to figure out who I am without your money. Your favoritism, your constant validation for breathing. You made me weak. You made her strong. Guess which one of us is gonna survive in the real world? The family unit they'd prioritized above all else was crumbling in real time. My mother looked between us, perhaps finally understanding that favoritism hadn't protected either daughter. It had just damaged us differently. This is all your fault, she hissed at me. You poisoned her against us. I spoke the truth, I corrected. If truth is poison to your relationship, what does that say about the relationship? Security knocked again, more insistently. Dr. Martinez moved to the door. I think it's time for you to leave. Christie has said what she needed to say. You've said what you came to say. There's nothing left. My parents looked around the room, taking in the chosen family that surrounded me. Professors, friends, a grandmother who'd sacrificed her relationship with her son to maintain one with me. The contrast with their isolation was stark. They'd alienated everyone in their pursuit of a perfect image that never existed. You'll regret this, my father said as final words. Family is family. Blood matters. Blood matters less than showing up, I replied, and you never showed up. They left then, my mother clutching my father's arm, their retreat watched by neighbors and recorded by phones. Megan lingered in the doorway, torn between following them and staying. Megan, I called out. She turned hope flickering in her eyes. The scholarship fund I announced when it's set up, you should apply. It's for people who need to build themselves from scratch. That includes golden children who never learned to stand. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You do that after everything. Not for you, I said honestly, for the person you might become if you do the work. She nodded, understanding the opportunity and the challenge. Then she followed our parents out, but her car went a different direction. Small steps toward independence. Whether she'd continue that journey remained to be seen. The door closed on my biological family, possibly forever. The room exhaled collectively, tension releasing like air from a punctured balloon. Emma immediately hugged me, followed by Dr. Martinez, then Eleanor. Soon I was engulfed in a group embrace, surrounded by people who'd chosen to love me without conditions. You did it, Eleanor whispered. You faced them down and spoke your truth. I'm so proud of you. We all are, Dr. Martinez added. That took incredible courage. I stood in the middle of my chosen family, feeling the weight of 22 years lifting from my shoulders. Outside, my parents drove away to face a future where their carefully constructed image had shattered. Inside, I was surrounded by genuine love earned through mutual respect rather than demanded through DNA. The confrontation was over. The healing could begin, and for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged, with family who showed up when it mattered, who celebrated my achievements, who loved me not, despite my independence, but because of it. The next morning arrived with a media storm that made the previous day's coverage look like a gentle breeze. Every major news outlet had picked up the story with opinion pieces dissecting everything from modern parenting to the nature of family itself. But it was the investigation that really turned the tables. Patricia from Channel 7 had done her homework overnight. Her team had uncovered a pattern of financial irregularities that painted an even darker picture than my speech had revealed. The morning segment opened with documents that made my stomach turn. In a shocking development in what's being called graduation gate, Patricia announced on the morning show, we've discovered that the Chen family received substantial adoption subsidies for 22 years, meant to ensure equal care for their adopted daughter. Our investigation reveals these funds totaling over $200,000 appear to have been diverted to support their biological daughter instead. I sat in Dr. Martinez's kitchen coffee, growing cold in my hands as the revelations unfolded on screen. Bank statements showed monthly deposits from the State Adoption Assistance Program. Corresponding withdrawals matched Megan's tuition payments, her car purchases, her shopping sprees. My parents had literally stolen money meant for my care and given it to their real daughter. That's fraud, Eleanor said quietly from beside me. Federal fraud. They could face prison time. The news segment continued with interviews from former neighbors and family friends, people who'd watched the favoritism but never spoke up until now. A teacher from elementary school revealed she tried to report the neglect, but was assured by my well-dressed, well-spoken parents that I was just naturally independent. Emma's phone buzzed with incoming messages. Christie, you need to see this. Megan posted something. I took the phone to find a lengthy Instagram post from my sister. Not the usual filtered selfie with vapid captions, but a raw confession. I've been complicit in my sister's neglect for 22 years. I benefited from our parents' favoritism while watching Christie work 3 jobs to survive college. I knew about the adoption before she did and kept quiet. I knew they were using her adoption subsidies for my expenses and said nothing. I'm not asking for forgiveness because I haven't earned it. I'm asking for accountability. Our parents stole from a child they promised to love. I'm willing to testify to that fact. The post had already garnered 50,000 likes and 10,000 comments, but it was the attached photos that truly damned our parents. Bank statements she'd photographed, text messages where they discussed hiding the fund transfers, email receipts showing my subsidy money paying for her spring break trips while I ate ramen in my dorm. She's burning it all down, Emma breathed. Everything. My phone rang. Patricia, again. Christie, we've had 3 more families come forward with similar stories about your parents. Apparently, they ran a consulting business that advised people on adoption tax benefits. We think this might be bigger than just your situation. The room spun slightly. It was one thing to expose my own neglect. It was another to discover my parents might have systematically helped others do the same thing. Also, Patricia continued, someone leaked security footage from the spa, not just from yesterday, from the past 5 years. Every missed birthday, every skipped event, they were there. The same spa, sometimes the same room. It's like they had a standing appointment to avoid your milestones. I had to sit down. The deliberateness of it, the calculated nature of their neglect, hit harder than spontaneous absences would have. They'd literally scheduled their abandonment of me. Within hours, the story evolved beyond personal family drama into potential criminal investigation. The FBI's white-collar crime division issued a statement about investigating adoption subsidy fraud. The IRS announced they were reviewing the Chen family's tax returns. The state licensing board opened an investigation into their consulting business. My parents, who'd spent years cultivating a perfect image, were watching it burn in real time. Their phones, according to Megan's texts, rang constantly with canceled contracts, severed friendships, and legal threats. The country club had moved from membership review to immediate expulsion. My father's employer had moved from suspension to termination. The PR firm they'd hired dropped them as clients, stating they couldn't represent individuals under federal investigation. But the true tables-turning moment came that afternoon. A woman appeared at Dr. Martinez's door, professionally dressed, but with eyes that held deep pain. "I'm Rebecca Chen," she introduced herself, Christie's birth mother. The air left my lungs. I'd wondered about her, of course, but the closed adoption had meant no information, no photos, nothing but questions. Now she stood before me, and I could see myself in the shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile. "I have been following your story," she said carefully. "I need you to know. I was 15. My parents threatened to disown me. The agency promised you'd go to a loving family who could give you everything I couldn't. If I'd known—" "Come in," Dr. Martinez said gently, ushering her inside. Rebecca's story unfolded over tea and tears. A teenage girl pressured into adoption, promised her baby would have advantages she couldn't provide. Years of searching when the closed adoption laws changed, hitting walls, because my adoptive parents had moved and changed my name. "I became a doctor," she said, echoing the career path I'd chosen. "Pediatric surgeon. I specialize in helping children because I couldn't help my own. I never married, never had other kids. You were my only child, and I've looked for you for 15 years. The reunion was nothing like movies portrayed. It was awkward, painful, filled with questions that had no good answers. But it was also real, honest, everything my adoptive family had never been. "I watched your speech," Rebecca said. "The strength that it took, the courage. I'm so proud of who you became, despite them, despite me giving you up, despite everything." "You were a child," I said, finding grace I didn't know I possessed. "They were adults who chose cruelty. There's a difference." We talked for hours about medical school, about resilience, about the strange parallels in our lives. She'd kept a box of things for me all these years: hospital bracelets, the outfit I'd worn home, photos of her pregnant belly, small treasures my adoptive parents had denied me. "I have a proposition," Rebecca said as evening approached. "I live in Baltimore, near Johns Hopkins. I have a spare room, if you'd like. I mean, I know I have no right to offer, but—" "You're offering me a place to live during medical school?" I asked, making sure I understood. "I'm offering to be in your life in whatever capacity you're comfortable with," she clarified. "Room, board, study partner, or just someone who gets it, your choice. No pressure." The generosity from someone who owed me nothing contrasted sharply with the stinginess from people who owed me everything. Here was a stranger offering unconditional support while my adoptive parents had made even basic care transactional. That evening, the news brought more revelations. The FBI had frozen my parents' assets pending investigation. Their house, purchased partially with adoption subsidies, meant for me would likely be seized. The cars, the jewelry, the comfortable life built on stolen funds, all of it was crumbling. Megan texted updates from her friend's couch where she was staying. Our parents had turned on each other, each blaming the other for the scheme. Their marriage, built on shared narcissism rather than love, couldn't survive the pressure. Divorce papers had already been filed. "They're destroying each other," Megan wrote. "Mom's claiming Dad masterminded everything. Dad's saying Mom manipulated him. Their lawyers are recording everything. It's brutal." I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No sorrow, just emptiness, where family feeling should have lived. They'd created this situation with 22 years of choices. The consequences were simply mathematics, cruelty, plus exposure equals destruction. The scholarship fund, meanwhile, had exploded beyond my wildest dreams. Donations poured in from around the world, from people who'd lived my story in their own ways. Former forgotten children who'd become successful. Parents who'd realized too late what they'd done. Siblings carrying guilt about favoritism they'd benefited from. In 24 hours, we'd raised over $1 million. Dr. Martinez helped establish a proper foundation. We named it Chosen Family Scholarships and set criteria that went beyond academics. We'd support students who'd achieved despite family neglect, who'd built their own support systems, who needed just one break to change their trajectories. The first recipient should be Megan. I decided surprising everyone, including myself. If she's serious about changing, about building a life without their influence, she'll need support, not favoritism, but the same chance we're giving other forgotten children to find themselves. It was either the best decision I'd ever make or the worst. Time would tell, but I'd learned that chosen family meant choosing to extend grace when it wasn't required, choosing to see potential where others saw waste. That night, I sat with my two mothers, biological and chosen, planning my future. Rebecca offered medical connections and a rent-free place to live. Sarah offered continued mentorship and Sunday dinners. Between them, I had more maternal support than I'd ever dreamed possible. You know what's funny? I said, looking at the criminal investigation news updates. They spent 22 years stealing from me in every possible way. Money, time, attention, love. And in the end, I'm headed to medical school with full funding, two amazing mothers, and a foundation that will help thousands. While they're headed to federal prison. The tables didn't just turn, they flipped completely. Success really is the best revenge, Eleanor noted from across the room. No. I corrected, thinking of all the forgotten children our scholarship would help. Success shared with others is the best revenge. They hoarded everything for one daughter. We're spreading everything to thousands. That's how you really win. The news cycle would eventually move on. The investigation would take months or years. My parents would face whatever justice the system deemed fit. But none of that mattered as much as what we were building from the ashes of their favoritism. A foundation, a future, a family bound by choice rather than chance. The tables hadn't just turned. We'd built entirely as a new ones, strong enough to support anyone who needed a place to belong. 3 weeks after graduation, the ripple effects of my speech had spread far beyond anything I could have imagined. What started as one woman's truth-telling had become a movement touching lives across the country and beyond. I sat in the temporary office space donated for the Chosen Family Foundation, reading through scholarship applications that broke my heart and rebuilt it simultaneously. Dear Christie, one letter began, I'm 17 and aging out of foster care next month. My biological parents kept my 3 younger siblings, but said I was too difficult. I have a 4.2 GPA and dreams of becoming an engineer, but no one to co-sign student loans. Another, I haven't spoken to my parents since I came out. They paid for conversion therapy instead of college. Your speech gave me hope that chosen family can be stronger than blood. And another, my parents spent my college fund on my brother's 3rd rehab stint. They said investing in me was throwing good money after bad, because I'm just a girl who will get married anyway. Each story echoed themes from my own experience, neglect disguised as tough love favoritism dressed up as practicality, abandonment, justified by the abandoned child's supposed independence. The numbers were staggering. In 3 weeks, we'd received over 10,000 applications. We need more reviewers, Dr. Martinez said, entering with another box of mail. She'd taken a sabbatical to help launch the foundation properly. Also, there's someone here to see you. I looked up to find a woman in her 50s, impeccably dressed but with haunted eyes. She clutched a designer purse like a lifeline. I'm Margaret Whitfield, she said quietly. You don't know me, but your story, your speech, it changed everything. I gestured for her to sit. These drop-in visits had become common people needing to share their own stories of family dysfunction after hearing mine. I have 2 daughters, Margaret continued. Have. I don't know anymore. She took a shuddering breath. I did what your parents did. Favored one, ignored the other. Told myself it was personality differences, that Emily was just easier than Jennifer. But it wasn't. I was lazy, I was cruel, and last week, Jennifer sent me your speech with 2 words. This, exactly. Tears flowed down her carefully made-up face. She hasn't spoken to me in 3 years. Changed her name like you. Built a successful career without any help from us. And I've been telling everyone she's ungrateful, difficult, jealous of her sister. Then I watched your speech and saw myself in your parents, saw the truth. What do you want from me? I asked gently but directly. I don't know, she admitted. Absolution advice. A time machine, I've destroyed my relationship with one daughter and crippled the other with dependence. Emily's 28 and still living at home, unable to function without constant validation. Jennifer's 30 and thriving in Seattle, but she won't return my calls. I recognize the pattern, one daughter strengthened by neglect, the other weakened by indulgence. Have you apologized? Really apologized, not justified or minimized. I've tried. She won't read my letters. Then respect her boundaries, I said firmly, and focus on what you can control. Emily needs to learn independence. You need therapy, and maybe years from now, Jennifer will be ready to hear you, or maybe not. That's her choice. Margaret nodded, defeated, but somehow lighter. She pulled out a check. For your foundation, it's Jennifer's college fund, the one I never used because I paid for Emily's everything instead. Maybe it can help someone else's Jennifer. After she left, I sat with the weight of unintended consequences. My speech hadn't just exposed my parents. It had held up a mirror to thousands of others, forcing reckonings in families across the world. The emails kept coming, parents realizing their failures, siblings acknowledging their complicity, forgotten children finding their voices. But there were darker ripples too. 3 copycat incidents of graduation confrontations had made news, not all ending well. 2 lawsuits had been filed by parents claiming defamation after their children publicly called out favoritism. A Facebook group called Parents Against Christie Chen had formed claiming I was destroying the sacred institution of family. You can't take responsibility for how people react to truth. Eleanor reminded me during our daily call. She'd become my anchor through the chaos, a steady voice of wisdom. You told your story. What others do with that mirror is their choice. The investigation into my parents had accelerated. Federal agents had discovered a network of families who'd used their consulting services to commit adoption subsidy fraud. 53 cases across 7 states, hundreds of thousands of dollars stolen from children who needed it most. My parents weren't just neglectful, they were allegedly kingpins in a specialized form of child exploitation. They're looking at 20 years minimum, the lead investigator told me during a follow-up interview. More if we can prove interstate commerce violations. Your speech didn't just expose personal neglect. It unveiled a criminal enterprise. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd spent my childhood telling me I wasn't special, wasn't worthy of attention or investment. Now their crimes against me would likely define the rest of their lives. Megan had started therapy and enrolled in community college, paying her own way for the first time. She'd been accepted for our scholarship, but only after submitting to the same rigorous process as other applicants. No favoritism, even in reverse. She texted updates, occasionally careful, respectful messages that acknowledged the distance between us. First day of accounting class, professor assigned group work. I didn't complain or expect special treatment. Small victory, but mine. Therapist says I have learned helplessness, working on unlearning, harder than any class. Saw mom at grocery store. She pretended not to know me, hurt less than expected. Each message showed growth, painful and slow, but real. Whether she'd continue the journey remained uncertain, but she was trying. That was more than our parents had ever done. Rebecca and I met weekly for coffee, building a relationship that neither of us quite knew how to define. Not mother-daughter exactly, but something meaningful. She shared stories of her years searching for me, the private investigator she'd hired, the false leads that broke her heart repeatedly. I used to dream about finding you, she admitted one afternoon. But in my dreams, you needed rescuing. The reality that you rescued yourself, that you became this incredible person without me, it's humbling. You were 15, I reminded her again. They were adults. The power differential matters. She smiled sadly. You're very generous with grace for everyone except them. They had power and chose cruelty. You had none and chose what you thought was best. That's the difference. The scholarship announcements went out on a Thursday. 100 recipients in our first round, each getting full rides to their chosen schools, plus mentorship from successful former forgotten children. The diversity of recipients reflected the universal nature of family dysfunction. Every race, religion, socioeconomic background, and geography represented. The ceremony was held at the university in the same auditorium where I'd given my speech. This time, the energy felt different, hopeful rather than shocked, healing rather than hurt. Recipients shared their stories, some for the first time publicly. A young man from Texas whose parents disowned him for leaving their cult. Twin sisters from Maine whose family kept their brother but surrendered them to state care. A girl from California whose parents spent her college fund on plastic surgery for her prettier sister. Each story reinforced the same truth: family isn't about blood, it's about choice, commitment, and showing up. 6 weeks ago, I addressed the gathered recipients and supporters. I stood on this stage and told my truth. The ripples from that moment have touched more lives than I imagined possible. Some of those ripples brought pain, forcing families to confront their failures, but many brought healing, connection, and hope. I looked out at the audience, seeing my chosen family in the front rows. Dr. Martinez and her husband, Eleanor with her sharp eyes and proud smile, Rebecca still learning how to be in my life, Emma and the other friends who'd become siblings, the professors who'd become parents, the community that had formed around, shared experiences of neglect transformed into triumph. To the recipients, you are not broken, you are not difficult, you are not too much or not enough. You are survivors who turned abandonment into achievement. And now you have a family of thousands who understand your journey because we've walked it too. The applause was warm, genuine, lacking the shock that had characterized my graduation. This was celebration without scandal, hope without hurt. The ripples were settling into something sustainable. Later, as we cleaned up, Patricia from Channel 7 asked for a follow-up interview. The first anniversary is coming up. We'd like to do a piece on how the foundation has grown, the lives changed, the ongoing investigations. Will you participate? I considered it. The media attention had been both blessing and curse, amplifying our message, but also attracting criticism and threats. But the forgotten children still being neglected deserved to know they weren't alone. Yes, I decided. But this time, we tell their stories, not mine. I've said what I needed to say. Now it's their turn. That night, I sat in my apartment sorting through scholarship thank you notes. My phone showed 17 missed calls from unknown numbers, probably journalists or critics or parents wanting absolution. I ignored them all, focusing instead on the letters from kids who'd found hope in my story. The ripple effects would continue for years, maybe decades. Families would reckon or refuse to. Forgotten children would find their voices or remain silent. The foundation would grow or struggle, but none of that was within my control. What I could control was showing up for these kids the way no one had shown up for me, being the witness to their achievements that I'd craved, providing the support that shouldn't be radical, but somehow was. My parents sat in federal custody awaiting trial. Megan struggled toward independence. I prepared for medical school with 2 mothers cheering me on. The ripples spread outward, touching lives in ways both beautiful and painful. And somewhere in a quiet moment between chaos and possibility, I finally understood the neglect that nearly broke me had instead built me into someone who could help break the cycle for others. The favoritism meant to diminish me had forged me into someone who could lift others up. The ripple effects weren't ending, they were just beginning. The federal courthouse in downtown Seattle buzzed with media attention as my parents' trial began 4 months after graduation. I sat in the gallery's front row, flanked by Rebecca on one side and Dr. Martinez on the other, feeling the weight of being both witness and evidence in the case that had exposed a nationwide fraud scheme. The United States versus Robert Chen and Linda Chen had become more than a simple fraud case. 53 families across 7 states had been identified as clients of my parents' consulting firm, Forever Family Solutions, which had specialized in helping adoptive parents maximize government benefits while minimizing actual support for adopted children. The prosecutors had built their case on a foundation of meticulous documentation, but it was my graduation speech that had opened the floodgates. "All rise," the bailiff announced as Judge Patricia Hernandez entered. She was known for her no-nonsense approach to white-collar crime, and her expression as she reviewed the charges suggested this case particularly offended her. My parents sat at the defense table looking smaller than I'd ever seen them. The designer clothes had been replaced with conservative suits that couldn't hide their diminishment. My mother's perfectly styled hair had grown out to show gray roots. My father's confident posture had crumpled into something defensive and frightened. They looked like strangers. The prosecutor assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Chang opened with devastating efficiency. "Your Honor, the defendants didn't just steal from their own adopted daughter. They built a business model around teaching other parents to do the same. They turned adoption subsidies meant to ensure equal care for vulnerable children into a funding stream for biological children's luxuries." He presented evidence that made my stomach turn. Emails where my mother had coached clients on how to document fake expenses for adopted children while funneling money to biological ones. Spreadsheets my father had created showing maximization strategies that amounted to elaborate fraud schemes. Client testimonials bragging about European vacations and private schools funded by adoption assistance while adopted children went without basics. Exhibit 47. Chang continued, is particularly illuminating. An email from Linda Chen to a client, quote, "Remember, the adopted one doesn't need the same investment. They're lucky to have a home. Focus resources on your real children who will carry on your legacy." Gasps rippled through the gallery. I gripped Rebecca's hand, feeling her answering squeeze. Even knowing the depths of their favoritism, seeing it commodified into business advice hit differently. The defense attorney tried to minimize, claiming my parents had only provided financial consulting within legal gray areas. But Judge Hernandez's expression suggested she wasn't buying it. "Gray areas," she interrupted. "Counseling parents to forge receipts is a gray area. Teaching them to claim therapy expenses for adopted children while using the funds for biological children's entertainment is a gray area." When they called me to testify, I walked to the witness stand on legs that felt disconnected from my body. The bailiff swore me in, and suddenly I was looking directly at my parents for the first time since the confrontation at Dr. Martinez's house. "State your name for the record," Chang began. "Christie Martinez, formerly Christie Chen." I answered, my voice steadier than expected. "Can you describe your relationship with the defendants?" "They adopted me as an infant. I lived in their home for 18 years. "Did they receive adoption subsidies from the state during that time?" "According to the documents I've seen, yes, approximately $900 per month for 22 years. "Did you benefit from these subsidies?" I looked directly at my parents. My mother had tears streaming down her face, but they felt performative, calculated for the judge's benefit. "No, I worked 3 jobs through high school to pay for my own necessities. I earned scholarships for college because they told me they couldn't afford to help. Meanwhile, my sister, their biological daughter, received CARS trips, full college funding." Chang walked me through specific incidents. The Christmas when Megan received a laptop phone and designer clothes while I got dollar store items. The medical care delayed because they claimed insurance issues while Megan got cosmetic procedures. the college tours they couldn't afford for me while flying Megan to visit party schools. I want to be clear, I said, feeling the weight of truth. This wasn't occasional favoritism or unconscious bias. This was systematic, deliberate resource hoarding. They had a daughter they loved, and a daughter they kept for profit. Objection, the defense attorney shouted. Speculation about intent. Overruled, Judge Hernandez said coldly. The witness is describing her lived experience. The cross-examination attempted to paint me as bitter, vengeful attention-seeking, but I had receipts, both literal and metaphorical. 22 years of documentation that Eleanor had helped compile, report cards they'd never signed, award ceremonies they'd never attended, birthday cards that showed the stark difference in messages to each daughter. Isn't it true, the defense attorney pressed, that you gave a graduation speech designed to humiliate your parents? I gave a graduation speech telling the truth, I corrected. If the truth humiliated them, that's not my responsibility. Other witnesses followed, former employees of Forever Family Solutions who'd grown uncomfortable with the practices, adoptive parents who'd been clients and now felt sick about what they'd participated in, social workers who'd tried to report concerns but been stymied by the Chen's middle-class presentation and manipulation. But the most damaging testimony came from an unexpected source, Megan. She took the stand on day 3 looking healthier than I'd seen her in years. Therapy and independence had begun to work their magic, replacing the hollow influencer sheen with something more substantial. I was the beneficiary of this scheme, she stated clearly. Every luxury I received, every opportunity I was given was funded by money meant for Christie's care. I knew it on some level, I just didn't want to acknowledge it. She detailed specific instances where our parents had discussed the adoption subsidies in front of her, how they'd laughed about getting paid to raise Christie while planning Megan's sweet 16 party, how they justified it by saying I was low maintenance and didn't need much. They didn't just steal money, Megan concluded. They stole Christie's right to be equally valued in our family, and they taught me that was normal, acceptable, even smart. It's taken losing everything for me to understand how twisted that was. The prosecution rested after a week of devastating testimony. The defense's case crumbled quickly. Character witnesses couldn't override financial evidence. Claims of loving parenting couldn't stand against documented neglect. By the time closing arguments arrived, the outcome felt inevitable. This case is about more than fraud, Chang told the jury. It's about the commodification of children. The defendants turned adoption, something meant to provide homes for vulnerable children, into a profit scheme. They didn't just fail Christie, they taught dozens of other parents to fail their adopted children too. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts, 23 counts of wire fraud, 18 counts of mail fraud, conspiracy to defraud the United States, money laundering, tax evasion. As the verdicts were read, my mother collapsed, wailing about injustice. My father sat frozen, seeming to age years in minutes, but I felt empty, not vindicated or satisfied, just hollow where family should have been. Judge Hernandez scheduled sentencing for the following month, but her comments made clear what was coming. The defendants abused positions of trust in the most fundamental way possible. They commercialized the neglect of children. The court will consider this when determining sentences. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, but I had nothing left to say about my parents. Instead, I talked about the foundation, about the 247 students we'd funded so far, about the support groups forming nationwide for forgotten children. This isn't about revenge, I told the cameras. It's about recognition that family isn't defined by adoption papers or DNA. It's defined by presence, support, and love. My parents may have failed, but my chosen family succeeded beyond measure. Eleanor, now 83 and fiercer than ever, grabbed a microphone. I want to say something to all the grandparents out there. If you see favoritism in your family, speak up. I waited too long, stayed silent too many years. Don't make my mistake. Those forgotten grandchildren need your voice. That evening, we held a quiet dinner at Dr. Martinez's house. My two mothers, Rebecca and Sarah, had developed their own friendship, bonding over their shared love for me and medicine. Eleanor held court telling stories about her own journey from complicity to activism. Emma and Marcus and others from my chosen family filled the space with warmth my childhood home had never known. "You know what's strange?" I said as we shared dessert. "I spent 22 years trying to earn their love, working harder, achieving more, being perfect. None of it mattered because their love was never available to me. It was reserved for Megan alone." "Their loss," Rebecca said fiercely. "Their complete, irredeemable loss." A month later, we returned for sentencing. The courtroom was even more packed with adoptive families and adoptees filling every seat. Some were there to support me, others to witness justice for their own stories. Judge Hernandez delivered sentences that reflected the scope of harm: 15 years for my father, 12 for my mother. Additional financial penalties that would strip them of every asset. Lifetime bans on working with children or in financial services. The defendants treated adoption as a business opportunity rather than a sacred trust, she stated. They turned children into commodities and love into a scarce resource. This court hopes these sentences send a clear message: children are not profit centers. They are human beings deserving of equal love and care. As court officers led my parents away, my mother turned to look at me one last time. Her expression held no remorse, only rage that I dared to hold them accountable. My father didn't look back at all. And then they were gone. Not just from the courtroom, but from my life in any meaningful way. The people who'd raised me without raising me, who'd been present without being present, who'd claimed parenthood without providing parenting. Outside, Megan waited on the courthouse steps. We hadn't spoken since her testimony, the gulf between us still too vast for easy bridging, but she approached carefully, respectfully. "I'm starting a support group," she said, "for golden children who are trying to deprogram, to unlearn the entitlement and learn actual skills. I was wondering, would you consider speaking to us not about forgiveness, just about perspective?" I studied her. This sister who'd never really been a sister. She'd testified truthfully, faced our parents' rage, started the hard work of change. It didn't erase 22 years of cruelty, but it was something. "Send me the information," I said finally. "I'll think about it." She nodded, understanding that was more than she had any right to expect. "I'm sorry, Christie, for all of it. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed to say it." "I know," I said, and I did know. Sorry was just a word, but accountability was action. She was trying to live the latter. As we drove away from the courthouse, I thought about reckonings. My parents had faced theirs in court, but mine was more complex. How do you reckon with loving people who couldn't love you back? How do you mourn parents who were never really parents? How do you heal from wounds that shaped your entire identity? "Medical school starts in 2 months, Rebecca said from the driver's seat. "New chapter, new city, new life." "Same me, though," I said. "Just fuller. Supported, witnessed." "The best version of you," Dr. Martinez added from the back seat. "The one they tried to suppress, but couldn't." The reckoning wasn't complete. Maybe it never would be. But justice had been served, truth had been honored, and hundreds of forgotten children had found hope in the ruins of my childhood. My parents would spend years in prison paying for crimes against children they'd sworn to protect. Megan would spend years in therapy, unlearning lessons they'd taught, and I would spend years healing, growing, becoming the doctor who saves lives because I'd learned to save my own first. The reckoning had come. Now the real work could begin. 6 months after the trial, I stood in my Baltimore apartment, watching the sunrise paint the harbor in shades of gold and pink. The space was small, but mine decorated with photos of my chosen family and achievements my parents had never celebrated. In 2 hours, I'd walk into Johns Hopkins Medical School for my first day, wearing the white coat Rebecca and Dr. Martinez had purchased together, their names embroidered inside the collar where only I could see them. The morning ritual had become sacred coffee shared over video call with my two mothers' updates on the foundation's work check-ins with the growing network of forgotten children we'd helped find their voices. Today's call carried extra weight. "Are you ready?" Dr. Martinez asked, her pride evident even through the laptop screen. "As ready as anyone can be for medical school," I replied, trying to calm the butterflies. "The imposter syndrome is real, though." "Oh, you belong there," Rebecca said firmly from her kitchen 2 miles away. We'd maintained separate spaces while building our relationship, both of us needing boundaries while navigating this unexpected second chance. "You earned this." "Besides," Eleanor chimed in from her corner of the group call, "you've already done the hardest thing. You've told your truth and survived the aftermath. Medical school will be challenging, but it won't require the courage that speech did." She was right, of course. The past 6 months had tested me in ways anatomy and physiology never could. The media attention had finally died down, but the foundation's work had exploded. We'd funded 312 students so far, with more applications arriving daily. Support groups had formed in every major city. A documentary about forgotten children in intact families was in production. The ripples continued spreading. "Christie," Rebecca's voice pulled me back. "There's something I want to give you before you leave." 20 minutes later, she stood at my door holding a worn leather journal. "I kept this during my pregnancy with you," she explained, pressing it into my hands. "Every thought, every fear, every hope. I want you to know that even when I couldn't keep you, you were loved. You were wanted. You just came at an impossible time." I opened it carefully, seeing her teenage handwriting fill page after page, letters to the baby she'd have to give up, promises that someday she'd find me, apologies for a choice that wasn't really a choice, the raw honesty of a 15-year-old facing an impossible situation. I couldn't finish the sentence. "Proof that your beginning wasn't loveless, even if your childhood was," she said. "You were wanted, Christie, just not by the people who should have continued wanting you after they brought you home." We sat together on my second-hand couch, reading passages aloud, her dreams that I'd become someone who helped others, her prayers that I'd find parents who cherished me, the irony that her first wish came true while her second failed spectacularly. "I have something for you, too," I said, retrieving a box from my closet. Inside were copies of every award, every acceptance letter, every achievement my adoptive parents had ignored. These belonged to someone who will actually celebrate them. Rebecca cried, then the kind of deep cleansing tears that wash away years of wondering. We sat together, birth mother and daughter sharing the milestones she'd missed, and I'd celebrated alone. It wasn't a replacement for the years lost, but it was something new. Something ours. My phone buzzed with a text from Megan. "Good luck today. You're gonna be an amazing doctor. The forgotten children you save won't stay forgotten. Trust me on that." Our relationship remained complicated. She'd completed her first semester of community college with a 3.8 GPA, paying her own way, learning self-reliance at 24. Her Golden Child Recovery Group had grown to include chapters nationwide. She was doing the work, but 22 years of damage couldn't be undone in 6 months. "Oh," Rebecca said, checking her watch. "Sarah said she's picking you up in 30 minutes. Something about a surprise." Dr. Martinez arrived exactly on time because punctuality was one of her many gifts to model for me. But she wasn't alone. A small convoy of cars had formed behind her, the Johnsons, Marcus and his family, 3 other professors who'd become my mentors, and Emma, who'd flown in from her new job specifically for this day. "Did you really think we'd let you start medical school without a proper send-off?" Dr. Martinez asked, pulling me into a hug. "Your chosen family has some traditions to establish." They'd prepared a blessing ceremony of sorts at a nearby park. Nothing formal or religious, just people who loved me sharing wishes for my journey. Mr. Johnson talked about persistence, Marcus about maintaining humanity in the face of difficult systems, Emma about remembering that healing others required healing ourselves. 6 months ago, Dr. Rodriguez said when his turn came, "You stood on a stage and showed us all what courage looks like. Now you're beginning a journey to heal bodies, but you've already shown you can heal spirits." The medical profession needs doctors who understand that health is more than physical, who know that sometimes the greatest medicine is being seen, heard, and valued. Each person placed a small object in a box, a stethoscope from one professor, a journal from another, a photo of our group from Emma. Tangible reminders that I wasn't entering medical school alone, even if I'd be the only one in the lecture halls. "From your grandma," Sarah said, handing me a wrapped package. Eleanor hadn't made the trip, but her presence was felt through the vintage medical bag inside, beautifully restored with a note. "Carried by another forgotten daughter who became a doctor in 1943. She saved lives and changed minds. You'll do both and more." The surprise continued at the medical school itself. The security guard at the entrance smiled with recognition. "You're the valedictorian, right?" "The one with the speech. My daughter watched it 15 times. She's applied for your scholarship." Inside, I found my assigned seat in the auditorium where orientation would begin. The name placard read Christie Martinez. And seeing it in official Hopkins font made everything real. I was here, despite them, because of me, supported by the village I'd built from the ashes of their neglect. "Christie." A young woman approached hesitantly. "I'm Anna. I was one of your scholarship recipients. I just wanted to thank you. My parents disowned me for choosing medicine over the family business. Your foundation saved my dream." Before I could respond, another student joined us. Then another. By the time orientation began, I'd met 7 current medical students who'd been forgotten children pushed aside for more favored siblings, or punished for independence. We exchanged numbers, forming an instant support group. Dean Williams opened orientation with the usual welcomes before adding something unexpected. "This year, we have the privilege of welcoming Christie Martinez, whose advocacy for forgotten children has already impacted thousands of lives. We look forward to seeing how she channels that passion for justice into healing." The recognition felt surreal. 6 months ago, I'd been invisible in my own family. Now I was visible on a national stage. The whiplash might have been disorienting if I hadn't had my chosen family to ground me. The first week of classes challenged me in ways I'd anticipated and others I hadn't. The academic rigor was intense but manageable. I'd always been a strong student. The emotional weight was harder. Every lecture on childhood development, on family systems, on genetic versus environmental factors triggered memories of my own neglect. But I wasn't processing alone anymore. Rebecca and I had dinner every Sunday, building our relationship one meal at a time. Dr. Martinez called daily, offering both maternal support and professional guidance. The network of forgotten children in my class provided understanding no traditionally raised student could offer. "It's strange," I told Emma during one of our video calls. "I spent so long trying to earn love that was never available. Now I have more love than I know how to receive." "That's the work now," she replied wisely. "Learning to accept what you deserve, letting yourself be loved without having to earn it through achievement." She was right. The healing wasn't just about processing the past, but learning to receive the present. Every time Rebecca showed up without being asked, every unexpected care package from my mentors, every text from someone checking in, just because I had to consciously accept it, rather than deflect or minimize. The foundation work continued alongside medical school. We'd partnered with universities nationwide to identify and support forgotten children before they aged out of toxic family systems. The selection committee had grown to include former recipients who'd graduated paying forward the support they'd received. 3 months into medical school, I received an unexpected letter. The return address was a federal prison in Texas. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won. My mother's handwriting hadn't changed, still perfectly controlled even from a prison cell. The letter was short, formal, and entirely self-serving. She wanted me to write a letter to the parole board supporting early release. She claimed to have reflected on her mistakes and recognized the harm caused. She signed it, "Your Mother," as if the title still applied. I shared it with my support system, getting unanimous advice. Don't respond, don't engage, don't give her any power over your healing. I filed the letter away unanswered, a reminder that some people change only their tactics, not their hearts. But the same week brought a different letter, this one from a 14-year-old in foster care. She'd aged out of a family that kept her younger siblings deemed too difficult because she excelled academically and asked too many questions. She'd watched my speech and wanted to know if it ever stopped hurting. I wrote back, immediately telling her the truth. The hurt transforms but doesn't disappear. You build around it, creating beauty where they left ashes. You find people who celebrate your questions instead of punishing them. You become the adult you needed when you were young. That weekend, I spoke at Megan's Golden Child Recovery Group. The room held 30 former favorite children, all grappling with the realization that their parents' love had been transactional, conditional on being better than a sibling. "I won't pretend to understand your specific struggles," I began. "Being the forgotten child and being the golden child create different wounds. But we share something: parents who turned love into a competition with predetermined winners and losers. The only way to heal is to stop playing their game." The discussion that followed was raw, honest, and painful. Several members cried, realizing how they'd participated in sibling abuse. Others raged at parents who'd set them up to fail by never teaching resilience. Megan facilitated with skill I wouldn't have believed she possessed 6 months earlier. "Yeah, Christie's right," she said as the meeting wrapped up. "We have to stop playing their game. For me, that meant cutting off our parents completely. They write from prison, promising changes, begging for visits. But they're the same people who taught me that love was zero-sum. I can't heal while staying in contact with that poison." After the meeting, we grabbed coffee, sitting in comfortable silence that would have been impossible a year ago. "You're different," I observed. "Stronger, more self-aware." "Therapy helps," she admitted, "in losing everything. Rock bottom has a way of clarifying what matters. I spent 24 years as their puppet. I refuse to waste the next 24 the same way." "What's your plan?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Accounting degree, then forensic accounting. I want to help catch people like them. Turn my understanding of financial manipulation into something useful." She paused. "Maybe that's naive, thinking I can transform complicity into justice." "That's not naive," I said firmly. "That's redemption. That's choosing to use your experience for good rather than letting it define you negatively." We parted ways with a hug, still not sisters in any traditional sense, but something new. Fellow survivors of the same toxic system, choosing healing over hatred. Medical school continued its demanding pace. Anatomy lab partnered me with Anna and 2 other forgotten children, our study group becoming another form of chosen family. We excelled academically while supporting each other emotionally through triggers and anniversaries and unexpected grief waves. "You know what I realized," Anna said one night as we reviewed cardiac physiology. "We're all going to be better doctors because of our backgrounds. We understand what it's like to be dismissed, overlooked, neglected. We'll see the patients others miss." She was right. Our wounds had become wisdom, our neglect transformed into heightened attention to others' needs. Every forgotten child who entered medicine carried the potential to revolutionize patient care simply by remembering what it felt like to be invisible. As my first semester drew to a close, I stood in my apartment surrounded by evidence of my new life. Medical textbooks covered every surface. Photos from foundation events lined the walls. Cards from scholarship recipients filled a growing box. The space breathed with purpose and connection, everything my childhood home had lacked. Rebecca knocked, arriving for our weekly dinner with groceries and gossip from her hospital. Sarah called as we cooked, sharing updates about department drama and new research opportunities. Eleanor texted photos from her bridge club, where she'd recruited 3 more donors for the foundation. This was family, not perfect or traditional, but real and present and growing. Every day brought new challenges, but none I faced alone. The forgotten daughter had become an unforgettable woman surrounded by love that chose her rather than obligated itself to her. To new beginnings, Rebecca toasted as we sat down to eat. To chosen families, I countered. To healing the world one forgotten child at a time. We said together the mission that bound us stronger than any DNA could. The beginning was no longer new, it was now, and it was beautiful. 8 years had passed since that pivotal graduation day. I stood in the same auditorium this time, wearing my own doctoral hood as Johns Hopkins Medical School prepared to graduate another class of physicians. But I wasn't receiving an award today. I was presenting one. The Christie Martinez Award for Compassionate Care had been established 3 years earlier by an anonymous donor who'd been moved by our story. It recognized medical students who demonstrated exceptional empathy and advocacy for underserved populations. Today's recipient was Anna, my anatomy lab partner, who'd become one of my closest friends. Before we present this award, Dean Williams announced, "I've asked Dr. Martinez to share a few words about the power of chosen family in medicine." Dr. Martinez. The title still sent a thrill through me every time I heard it, not because of the achievement itself, but because of everyone who'd helped make it possible despite the 2 people who should have cared most. I approached the podium, looking out at a sea of faces that included my entire chosen family. Dr. Sarah Martinez, now in her 70s, but still sharp as ever, sat in the front row between Rebecca and Eleanor. At 91, my grandmother had insisted on attending, declaring that wild horses couldn't keep her from seeing her granddaughter change the world again. 8 years ago, I stood in this auditorium as a forgotten daughter. Today, I stand here as proof that family isn't defined by DNA or legal documents, but by who shows up when it matters. And sometimes the family that chooses you is stronger than the one that didn't. I spoke about the forgotten children who'd become physicians, nurses, therapists, and social workers. The 2 847 students our foundation had supported through college and graduate school. The ripple effects that had transformed pain into purpose across the globe. Ana Rodriguez exemplifies what happens when forgotten children refuse to remain invisible. I continued gesturing to my friend, disowned by her family for choosing medicine over their plans. She spent 4 years not just excelling academically, but revolutionizing how we approach pediatric care for children in foster systems. She sees the unseen because she was once unseen herself. Anna accepted her award with tears streaming down her face, hugging me tightly before addressing the crowd. Dr. Martinez taught me that being forgotten by some people just makes room for others to remember you. Today, I'm remembered. Today, we all are. The ceremony continued with other awards and speeches, but my mind wandered to how much had changed. The foundation had grown beyond anything I'd imagined, with chapters in all 50 states and 12 countries. We'd published research on the psychological impacts of favoritism within intact families. We'd successfully lobbied for legislation protecting adoption subsidies from misuse. My phone buzzed with a message I'd been expecting. "She's here, 10 centimeters, hurry." I slipped out during the musical interlude my chosen family following. Emma was in labor at the same hospital, about to welcome her first child with her wife. She'd asked me to be present, to be the aunt who actually shows up, as she put it. 3 hours later, I held my goddaughter for the first time. Emma had named her Sarah Rebecca, honoring both my mothers. The baby's tiny fingers wrapped around mine with surprising strength, and I whispered promises about chosen family and unconditional love and never having to earn her place in the world. She's perfect. Rebecca breathed from beside me, tears flowing freely, just like her godmother was when I first held her. Though Christie was significantly less wrinkly, Dr. Martinez added with a laugh, the sound filling the room with warmth. My pager buzzed, calling me back to my own patients. As a pediatric psychiatrist specializing in family trauma, my days were full of forgotten children still trapped in toxic systems. Each one reminded me why the work mattered, why healing ourselves was just the first step in healing the world. "Go," Emma said, understanding. "Save the world. We'll be here when you get back." And they would be. That was the miracle of chosen family. They showed up and stayed. Later that evening, I found myself in my office completing notes on a particularly difficult case, a 7-year-old whose parents lavished attention on her neurotypical brother while treating her autism as an embarrassment. The parallels to my own story were obvious, but different each forgotten child. Forgotten in their own unique way. A knock interrupted my documentation. "Dr. Martinez, sorry to bother you, but there's someone here who says she's your sister." I looked up to find Megan in the doorway, professionally dressed in a suit that suggested the forensic accounting career had worked out. We'd maintained distant contact over the years, holiday cards and occasional coffee when our paths crossed. She'd never visited me at work before. "I'm sorry to ambush you," she said quickly, "but I have news that couldn't wait." I gestured for her to sit, studying this woman who'd shared my childhood, but never my experience of it. 8 years of therapy and independence had transformed her from the golden child who needed constant validation into someone who appeared comfortable in her own skin. "They're getting out," she said without preamble. "Both of them. Early release for good behavior and overcrowding. They'll be on probation, can't work with children or in finance, but they'll be free." The news should have shaken me. 8 years ago, it would have. But now I felt only mild curiosity about what they'd do with their freedom. They'd lost everything that mattered to them. Money status, the facade of perfect parenthood. Their early release couldn't give any of that back. "How do you feel about it?" I asked Megan, more interested in her reaction than my own. "Relieved, honestly. They can't contact either of us. It's a condition of parole. But knowing they're out there, potentially starting over..." She trailed off, then squared her shoulders. "I came to warn you, but also to tell you something else." She pulled out an envelope, aged and yellowed. "I've been in therapy for 8 years, as you know. Last month we did this exercise about making amends, not for them, for me. And I remembered something I'd hidden." Inside the envelope was a letter addressed to me in a child's handwriting. My name was spelled wrong, the letters shaky, but the message was clear. "Dear Christie, happy birthday. You are the best sister. Love, Megan." The date showed I would have been 6, her 4. "You made me that birthday card," she explained, "out of construction paper and crayons. Mom threw it away, said I was wasting time on you when I should focus on my dance recital. But I saved this, hid it. Some part of me, even at 4, knew it was wrong. I should have given it to you then. I should have stood up to them. I'm sorry it took 30 years. I held the letter, this artifact from a time when we might have been real sisters, if our parents hadn't poisoned the well. It didn't erase the years of cruelty, but it suggested something I'd never considered, that maybe before the favoritism calcified, we'd had a chance. Thank you," I said simply. This means something." "I'm also here professionally," she added, shifting gears. "My firm specializes in recovering assets from financial crimes. We've traced hidden accounts your parents established, money that should go to their victims. The federal prosecutor asked me to coordinate with the foundation about distributing restitution." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. The golden child using skills learned from watching our parents manipulate money to now help return funds to forgotten children they'd helped steal from. We worked through the details, professional but not cold. As she prepared to leave, Megan paused at the door. I know we'll never be sisters in any real way, she said. Too much damage for too long. But I want you to know I watch every interview you do, read every article about the foundation. You became everything they said you couldn't be, and you did it without their poison. I'm proud to have known you, even if I never knew how to show it. You're showing it now, I replied. That matters too. She left with a nod, and I returned to my notes. But my mind kept drifting to the letter to the 4-year-old who'd tried to love her sister before learning it wasn't allowed. We were all victims of our parents' choices, just in different ways. My phone lit up with the family group chat, the real one filled with chosen connections. Photos of baby Sarah flooded the screen. Updates from scholarship recipients about their successes. Plans for Eleanor's 92nd birthday party, reminders about Sunday dinner at Rebecca's, the usual rhythm of a family that functioned through mutual care rather than obligation. A soft knock brought my attention back to the present. Dr. Rodriguez, my research mentor turned colleague, peered in. Still here, it's nearly 9. Just finishing up. Long day. Good day, though, he said, referencing the ceremony. You should be proud. The kid who won her first science fair with no one watching has become the woman filling auditoriums with chosen family. Sometimes I can't believe this is my life, I admitted, that the girl nobody wanted became surrounded by so much love. You were always wanted, he corrected gently. Your parents were just too broken to see what they had. Their loss became everyone else's gain. After he left, I completed my notes and prepared to head home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new forgotten children to help remember their worth. The foundation's work would continue, the healing would spread, the ripples would keep expanding. As I walked to my car, I thought about my parents, soon to be free, but forever imprisoned by their choices. They'd lost 2 daughters, 2 different ways. They destroyed their reputation, their finances, their facade of perfection, all for favoritism that benefited no one in the end. But their destruction had birthed something beautiful. Thousands of forgotten children finding their voices, hundreds of golden children learning to stand without pedestals, families examining their dynamics and choosing change, laws protecting vulnerable children, a revolution of chosen love over forced obligation. My phone buzzed with a final message of the day from a scholarship recipient graduating college next week. Dr. Martinez, I just wanted you to know I'm graduating summa cum laude. My parents still won't come, but my chosen family will fill a whole section. Thank you for showing me that's enough. Actually, it's more than enough. It's everything. I smiled, typing back, it is everything. Congratulations, and remember, the family that chooses to celebrate you is your real family. Blood just determines genetics, not love. The circle had closed but kept expanding. The forgotten daughter had become the remembering doctor, making sure no child's achievements went uncelebrated. The speech that had started at pain had transformed into a movement of healing. Driving home through Baltimore's twinkling lights, I felt the satisfaction of a life well lived. Not perfect, still scarred in places that occasionally ached, but full, meaningful, surrounded by love that chose me every single day. My parents had given me life, but withheld living. My chosen family had given me both, plus the purpose of ensuring others received the same. 8 years after that graduation speech, I finally understood the gift hidden in their neglect, the freedom to build something better. The Foundation's motto, etched in stone at our headquarters, captured it perfectly: forgotten by some, chosen by others, remembered forever. I was Dr. Christie Martinez, valedictorian and vanquisher of invisibility, daughter of many mothers and sister to thousands. My parents' early release couldn't touch the life I'd built from their absence. Their freedom meant nothing compared to the liberation I'd found in truth. The resolution wasn't about forgiveness or reconciliation, it was about transformation. turning pain into purpose, neglect into nurture, abandonment into abundance. It was about proving that the best families are often the ones we choose, and the strongest love comes from those who show up by choice rather than obligation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new forgotten children to help new ways to expand the definition of family. But tonight, I drove home to my chosen family, my real family, knowing I was exactly where I belonged. Not despite being forgotten, but because of everyone who'd chosen to remember. Have you ever felt overlooked or forgotten by family who should have been there for you? Or maybe you've been that chosen family for someone else. Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We share new stories of triumph over adversity every week. And don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to know they're not alone in building their own chosen family. Remember, being forgotten by some just makes room for others to choose you. You are worthy of celebration, support, and unconditional love, whether it comes from blood relatives or the family you build yourself. Thank you for being part of our storytelling family. Until next time, may you always be surrounded by those who choose to see your worth.